Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. The first scream wasn't human, at least not anymore. It carried through the trees like something torn apart by claws too sharp to exist, a sound that dug into the chest of anyone unlucky enough to hear it. By the time Marcus Daniels stumbled across that patch of forest soil, the one still wet, still steaming, as if something had died there minutes ago, he knew he had already crossed into a place that should have stayed forgotten. He had been warned, of course. Everyone in the town of Ashthorne knew not to take the northern trail after dark. They said it wasn't just the wolves or the shifting bogs that swallowed travelers whole. They spoke of the White House in the woods, the one that never rotted, no matter how many years passed. Some swore its windows still glowed though no one lived there, and if you walked close enough, you could see shapes pacing inside. Marcus didn't believe any of it, at least not until that scream. And he should have turned back. He should have sprinted until his lungs tore. But what Marcus found that night, what he touched, smelled, carried back with him, would not only destroy him, it would spread. It would eat through the town like fire under dry pine, catching on everyone it brushed against. Friends, strangers, family. No one would be safe. That night, he took something from the forest, and the forest wanted it back. But this isn't just Marcus's story. It's yours too, because the thing that happened in Ashthorne didn't end when the house burned. The screams still echo in different voices, carried far beyond the trees. And if you're listening now, maybe it's already too late. It began on the coldest October in 30 years. The town was small, forgotten on the map, the kind of place with one gas station, one diner, and too many boarded-up shops to count. Most people kept to themselves, especially once the leaves fell. Marcus wasn't like most people. He had a way of ignoring rules if they got in the way of what he wanted. That night, what he wanted was answers. His younger sister had vanished 3 days earlier, last seen heading toward the northern trail with a friend. Police searched. Volunteers combed the woods, but nothing turned up. Her friend was found alone, wandering miles away with torn clothes and glassy eyes, mumbling about the windows that watched. After that, no one dared return to the trail, except Marcus. The path stretched black under the moonlight, roots twisting like knuckles breaking through the earth. He carried only a flashlight and a knife too small to matter. With every step, he felt the silence pressing tighter, until even the crunch of his boots seemed like an offense. That was when he found the soil. Dark, wet, steaming in the cold. It wasn't blood. It wasn't water. It was something thicker, clinging to his skin like syrup when he touched it. And though the forest was frozen with autumn frost, the ground there was hot, as though something had burned from beneath. He wiped his hand on his jeans, muttering a curse, and that was when the sound came again. Closer this time. Not a scream, a cry, a girl's voice. His sister's. He ran. Branches clawed his arms, tore his jacket. The flashlight beam swung wild, catching trunks, roots, shadows that seemed to flinch from the light. The cry grew louder, guiding him deeper, until the trees thinned and he saw it. The house. It rose pale and perfect in the clearing, untouched by decay though it looked older than the town itself. 2 stories, every window unbroken, every board polished as if it had been painted yesterday. Yet no one lived there. No path led to the door. No smoke curled from the chimney. And still, in the upstairs window, Marcus swore he saw a sister's face. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Then the lights went out. The door opened on its own. He didn't touch it. The hinges creaked like a throat clearing, and a breath of warm air slipped out, carrying the smell of rotting fruit. Inside, the hall stretched longer than the house should allow. Shadows clung to the ceiling, moving when his flashlight stayed still. "Lena," his voice cracked. "It's me." I'm here.
No answer.
Only the faint click of heels on wood. Somewhere deeper inside, he stepped over the threshold and the door closed behind him. At once, the air changed. The forest outside was gone. He couldn't even hear the wind. Only the house, breathing. The floorboards swelled under his boots as if they had a pulse, faint but steady. The cry came again, this time from the basement. He shouldn't have gone down there. He shouldn't have followed that spiral staircase into the black beneath the house. But love is a cruel master, and fear of losing family is stronger than fear of the unknown. The steps were narrow, slick with moisture. Each creak echoed too loud, as though the house was listening. At the bottom, the flashlight beam caught stone walls slick with moss, chains bolted into them, and something else. Scratch marks, thousands of them, carved into the rock by desperate hands. And in the center of the room sat a chair. His sister was tied to it, or what was left of her, her head lolled forward, hair hanging in clumps. Her skin was gray, her lips cracked, but her chest still rose, faintly, as though each breath cost her everything. Her eyes flicked open at the light. They were not the same eyes he remembered. Marcus, she whispered, and the sound was two voices at once. Then the chains rattled. Not hers. Something moved in the far corner. The flashlight beam shook in his hand, sweeping across the stone until it found it a figure crouched low, its face pressed to the wall. At first, it looked like a man, naked and thin. But when it turned, its mouth stretched wider than any jaw could, teeth black and rotted, eyes glowing faint yellow. It hissed like a snake, and the sound rattled the chains on his sister's chair. Marcus froze. The creature crept forward, not fast, not lunging, but slow, deliberate, savoring his terror. Its fingers scraped the floor, long nails leaving grooves in the stone. "Don't let it touch you," his sister whispered. Her voice was clearer now, desperate. "Whatever you do, don't let it." The thing lunged. He slashed with the knife, blind with panic, catching its arm. Black fluid spilled, hissing where it hit the ground. The creature screeched and recoiled. Marcus cut his sister free, dragging her to her feet. She was lighter than she should have been, fragile as a husk, but she stumbled with him toward the stairs. The creature shrieked, shaking the walls. Something in the house shifted with it, doors slamming upstairs, windows rattling. The staircase stretched longer, impossibly long, as though the house itself was fighting to keep them below. But they ran, and somehow, they burst back into the night, collapsing on the forest floor. The house loomed silent behind them, every window dark. Marcus pulled his sister close, trembling, whispering that it was over. But when he looked into her face, her eyes glowed faint yellow. She smiled. That was the beginning. 3 days later, the first deaths were reported. A hunter found skinned alive in his cabin, every mirror in his house smashed. Then, the cashier at the gas station, her body discovered in the freezer with her own hands missing. Each victim, the police said, showed signs of restraint, chains, bindings. Someone had taken them, tortured them, then left them like warnings. Marcus didn't tell anyone what he had seen. He should have. But how could he explain the truth? That the thing he had carried out of that house wasn't his sister anymore. That it lived in her skin, speaking with her voice, smiling with her face. She stayed in his home. She ate nothing, slept never. And every night he heard the chains rattling in his basement, though he had locked the door. By the time he realized what he had done, the forest wanted her back, and it would not stop with her. It would come for them all. Marcus hadn't slept in 2 days. Not really. Every time his eyes closed, he saw the basement, the chair, the eyes, the smile, and Lena, no. The thing that wore Lena's face. Watched him from the living room, night after night, with that same fixed grin that didn't touch her eyes. The way she moved was wrong. Her steps made no sound. She didn't blink. When she spoke, her voice was just a little too smooth. Like each word was picked with care she never used before. He tried to convince himself it was trauma. She had been missing. God knows what had happened. But in his bones, he knew better. That wasn't his sister. It was something pretending to be. The town didn't seem to notice, not at first. They chalked up the deaths to wild animals. A bear, maybe. A mountain lion. Something desperate and feral, driven out of the deep woods by the cold snap. But bears don't nail corpses to trees. Bears don't write words in blood. When that third body was found, the librarian, wrists broken backward, mouth sewn shut with her own hair, the whispers started. Marcus listened. He listened more than he should have. Every person who died had been part of the search for Lena. The pattern struck him like lightning, painful and sudden. He remembered the faces. He remembered their voices shouting her name in the trees. And now they were all gone, one by one, ripped from the town like rotten teeth. Only he and one other remained. Jeremy Stokes, a loner, the last to see Lena before she vanished. And the only one besides Marcus who had made it out of those woods alive. Marcus found him, holed up in the back of his father's mechanic shop, surrounded by tools and empty cans of beans, windows boarded like the world had ended. Jeremy looked worse than he remembered, thin, twitchy, eyes darting like a rabbit before the hawk hits. "She's not your sister," Jeremy said before Marcus could even speak. "You brought it back, didn't you?" Marcus didn't answer. Jeremy didn't need him to. "They call it hollow mouth," he whispered, voice cracking. "My granddad used to tell stories. Thought he was just senile. Said there was a thing that lived in the house. Not haunted. Not cursed. It was alive. Old as the bones under the forest. Woke up every few decades hungry. It doesn't kill you outright. It empties you. Sucks you dry from the inside and wears your face like a mask." Marcus sat in silence, bile rising in his throat. "Once it's out," Jeremy continued, "you can't put it back. It doesn't stay one thing. It spreads. Like rot. It'll look like Lena until it doesn't need to." And then he trailed off, staring at the flickering fluorescent light overhead. Then it starts collecting. Marcus wanted to call him crazy. Wanted to grab him by the collar and scream that his sister was alive, that she had come back to him. But deep down, he knew Jeremy wasn't wrong. He had seen the thing in the basement. He had heard the voice double over itself. Lena's smile didn't crack, didn't twitch, didn't falter even when she stared at nothing for hours. Like something behind her eyes was listening to something else entirely. "I tried to go back," Jeremy said suddenly. 2 nights ago. Thought maybe if I burned it, it would stop. But the houselet moved. It wasn't where it should have been. I walked for hours. Thought I was losing it. And then I found the clearing again. The house was closer to town. Marcus's stomach turned to ice. "Closer?" Jeremy nodded. "It's coming. It's not just hunting in the woods anymore. It wants more. It needs more. The longer it stays out, the more it feeds. And it doesn't feed on meat. It feeds on people. Who they were. Their names. Their memories. You've seen it." He had. Lena couldn't remember their childhood. Not a single moment. She stared at their family photos like they were puzzles she couldn't solve. When he asked her about their mother's lullaby, the one she used to sing when thunder scared her, Lena's lips had just curled up into that wide, flat smile. "Where is it now?" Jeremy asked. "At my house," Marcus whispered, "sleeping. Things like that don't sleep." Marcus swallowed. "Then it's waiting." He returned home just before dawn. The house was silent, still. Lena sat curled in the same spot on the couch, eyes closed, breathing shallow and slow. Her head turned the moment the door clicked shut, eyes open, watching him. "You're up early," she said. "I went for a walk." Her smile tightened. In the dark, he nodded, voice dry. "I needed to think." She stood slowly like a puppet pulled by strings. "Did you see him?" He froze. "Jeremy," she said. "He smells like fear. It clings to him like ash." His heart pounded. "I don't know what you're talking about." She stepped closer. "You do. But that's all right. You'll understand soon. You'll stop fighting." Her voice changed as she spoke. deeper, layered, like something climbing through her throat that didn't belong. Marcus reached behind him, fingers fumbling for the knife drawer. Her head tilted, eyes following his hand. "I wouldn't," she said, soft but sharp. "If you hurt this body, it breaks your Lena. She's still in here." Screaming, he froze. She smiled again. "She begs me to stop every second, but I don't think I will." And then she walked past him like nothing had happened. "I'm hungry. You should cook something." He didn't move for a long time. His legs trembled, his breath caught in his throat, and the kitchen light flickered once, then again. By the end of the week, the town was starting to change. A strange fog crept in from the woods each morning, thick and heavy, refusing to lift until midday. People muttered about headaches, strange dreams, sleepwalking. Pets disappeared. Crows circled the church bell without landing. And then the sheriff vanished, no note, no sign, just gone. Lena, or the thing in her skin, grew more bold. She roamed now, visiting the grocery store, chatting with neighbors, smiling at children. She was perfect, too perfect, no mistakes, no stumbles, and those who looked into her eyes too long grew off. Mrs. Keller, who always worked the bakery, locked herself in the walk, in freezer, and chewed through her own tongue. Her husband swore she had spoken to Lena just minutes before. And Jeremy stopped answering his phone. Marcus drove to the shop, heart sinking with every turn. The windows were shattered. Blood smeared the floor. And in the center, nailed to the wall, was Jeremy's body. A message carved into his chest. He remembered too much. Marcus fell to his knees and vomited. He knew what had to be done. The house. The real one. The source. If it was moving, if it was getting closer, he had to find it again. Had to stop it before the whole town was swallowed up. He packed supplies, flashlight, rope, gasoline, matches, and a photograph of Lena, the real Lena, the one where she was smiling at the lake, the one where her eyes were still her own. He left just after sunset, and the forest was waiting. The path was gone. Every trail he'd known, every landmark, erased. The trees bent differently, roots snaking like veins over soil that steamed in the cold. But he walked anyway, and the deeper he went, the more the air pressed against him. Heavy, wet, breathing. He found the house where it wasn't supposed to be. Closer, too close. Just past the Miller property, a mile from town. It sat there, white and clean, untouched, humming like a heartbeat, and every window glowed. He stepped into the clearing. The door opened, and something inside smiled back. Marcus didn't breathe as he stepped over the threshold. The floor beneath his boots felt warmer than the ground outside, like blood pulsing through old wood. The same smell from before lingered, sweet and foul, like rotting fruit soaked in perfume. And though the house was silent, he knew it wasn't empty. The walls seemed to flex in slow, shallow motions, like lungs drawing breath just out of rhythm with his own. He kept the flashlight low, the beam tight, afraid of what it might land on. Dust floated in the air, but never settled. The hallway stretched farther than it should, like the house was growing while he walked. Doorways opened into rooms that shouldn't have been there, dens full of broken toys, kitchens with rotted dishes still on the table, bedrooms with beds made neatly, as if someone might return at any second. Yet not a single photograph hung on the walls, no mirrors, nothing reflective, just pale wallpaper and creaking floors. He moved deeper. The upstairs landing loomed ahead, the banister carved with patterns that looked like eyes. The light bulb above him blinked and buzzed, and then, just as his boot touched the first stair, a voice whispered from behind him. "Did she taste like you remembered?" Marcus spun, heart hammering. No one. Just the long empty hall stretching behind him. But the voice, deep, flat, unhurried, was still there. Or did her skin feel different? Now that something else lives inside it. He climbed the stairs fast, driven more by panic than purpose. Every step groaned like a warning, but he didn't stop. He had to find the source. Had to see the truth again, not for Lena, but for himself. The guilt had been tearing at him. He had brought this back. He had unleashed it. And if there was any way to stop it, it would be here, where it all began. The upstairs hall was darker than the rest of the house. His flashlight dimmed with each step, the beam flickering like the batteries were dying, though he'd packed them fresh. Doors lined the corridor on both sides, each closed tight. Then one creaked open. Softly, slowly. The room inside was a child's bedroom, the walls papered with faded moons and stars, a mobile turning slowly in the stale air. A single bed sat in the center, the sheets tucked tight, the pillow fluffed. Something about the room felt recent. Too clean, too deliberate, and on the nightstand a photograph. His hand shook as he reached for it. It was Lena, the real Lena. No mistaking it, freckles across her nose, the chipped tooth from when she fell off her bike. But her eyes had been blacked out, not scribbled, not scratched. Cut, as if something with fingers too precise had pressed through the paper and removed only her gaze. He turned it over. A message was scrawled on the back in red ink. She remembers more than she should. Fix that. A floorboard creaked behind him. Marcus whipped around. A tall figure stood in the hallway, barely lit by the flickering light. Thin, long arms. Head tilted at an unnatural angle, neck bending like wet cloth. No face, just skin stretched flat across where eyes and mouth should be. But it smelled like Lena. Like her shampoo, her room, her childhood. It stepped closer. Marcus bolted from the room, slamming the door behind him. He heard the hinges groan, but the thing didn't follow. Not yet. He stumbled down the hall, past the closed doors, until he reached one that was slightly ajar. The basement. His stomach turned. But this was why he'd come. He descended, the air growing colder, heavier with each step. The flashlight blinked twice, then went out. Total black. He fumbled for the matches in his coat pocket, struck one, and held it high. The basement hadn't changed. The same stone walls, the same chair in the center. Chains hung slack, waiting, and in the far corner, new this time, stood a mirror, cracked. Dusty, but not broken. He approached, match trembling. In the reflection, he saw himself, but not quite. The Marcus in the mirror moved just a second too late. The same eyes, but duller. Mouth twitching into a grin that didn't belong to him. He stared. The reflection whispered, "I'm already inside." The match went out. Darkness, silence. Then footsteps, not from above, from behind him. He spun, backing into the wall, heart slamming against his ribs. The chain chair was empty, but something crouched beside it, breathing, low, wet. He reached for the gas canister on his back, hands fumbling. The matchbox slipped from his pocket. He dropped to his knees, searching, vision blurred with panic. Then fingers touched his wrist. Cold, thin. Too many joints. He screamed, flailing backward, pulling the rope fuse from the canister, striking a match against the floor. Light flared, and for one terrible second, he saw it. The face of every victim layered over each other. Mouths within mouths, hands twitching beneath skin like trapped insects. It screamed, not in pain, but rage. Marcus threw the match. Fire bloomed. He didn't wait to see if it caught. He ran, up the stairs, through the hall, down the steps. Smoke followed. Heat pressed behind him. The house moaned, deep and low, like something waking up for real. He burst into the night, coughing, lungs burning. Behind him, the house flickered with orange light, flames climbing fast. But it didn't burn like wood. It didn't crumble or groan. It hissed, like steam escaping flesh. The paint blistered, the windows bled, and then silence. The house was gone, just ash, no rubble, no embers. Just a circle of white ash, untouched by wind. Marcus stared, shaking, unsure whether he had won or lost. He felt lightheaded, weak. But somehow, it was over. He turned to leave. But when he reached the road, he saw her, Lena, standing by the mailbox, smiling. "You burned the wrong one," she said. And the streetlights behind her blinked out, one by one. Darkness spread. The real house was never in the woods. It had always been moving closer. She didn't blink. Marcus stared at her through the dark, the kind that didn't feel natural. Thicker, heavier than the usual night. The kind that made street signs vanish, turned familiar roads unfamiliar. Lena, or whatever now wore Lena's shape, stood just beyond the last working streetlight, where the orange glow began to flicker and stutter like a dying breath. "You burned the wrong one," she said again, her voice calm, soft, nearly sing-song. But there was no warmth in it, just hunger wrapped in sweetness. Marcus didn't move, his muscles locked, frozen in place by the impossibility of what stood in front of him. The house was gone. Gone. He had seen it collapse into ash with his own eyes. He had watched the flames lick the sky, had smelled the strange burning that turned paint into steam and walls into dust. And now she was here, untouched, smiling. "Don't be afraid," she said, stepping forward. Her feet made no sound on the asphalt, not even a shuffle. "You helped me. You did. I was trapped there, waiting to be let out. Now I'm free. You set me free, Marcus." "No," he said, though his voice came out dry, hollow. "I burned it. I burned you." She tilted her head, still smiling. "Not me. A piece. A shell. One of many. That house was old. A good home, but temporary, like skin. You shed it when it gets too tight. Don't you?" Marcus backed away. Each step felt slow, like he was wading through water. The air was thick now, humid, wrong, and the shadows that stretched behind her didn't follow the rules. They bent the wrong way. Twitched when she stood still. He turned and ran. The road was familiar, but not. The houses he passed, dim, windowless, too quiet, looked like copies of each other, like someone had printed the same house over and over with slight imperfections. A mailbox at the wrong angle. A porch with too many steps. A car parked with no tires, just the shell. He didn't stop to study them. He ran. The fog began to roll in. Not a mist, not a cloud, but a wall. Dense, pale, and seething. It crawled low to the ground, wrapping around his ankles as he moved. It tasted metallic when he breathed it in, like rust and pennies. And somewhere in the distance, he heard music, a lullaby, soft, off-key, Lena's lullaby. The one their mother used to hum when storms rattled the windows and lightning danced through the curtains. But this version dragged each note like it hurt to sing. It echoed through the fog like it was being played on a broken music box. Then came the voices, whispers, dozens of them, too many to pick apart, all saying his name, not shouting, not calling, just repeating, again and again and again, "Marcus, Marcus, Marcus." He stumbled off the road and into the woods, thinking it was safer than whatever was unfolding in the streets behind him. Trees loomed overhead, silent, branches tangled like grasping hands. The fog followed, slithering through roots and underbrush, pushing him deeper. And that's when he saw the lights, not fire, not lamps, windows, hundreds of them, in the trees, in the ground, floating in the fog, all glowing faint yellow, all watching. A window to every house it had ever been. Each one showed a scene, a different room, a different time, a different version of the house. One burned, one crumbling, one pristine and furnished with toys that moved on their own. Another window showed a family frozen mid-meal, unmoving, their faces melted into their plates. Another showed a girl staring into a mirror, her reflection grinning wider than her mouth should allow. One window was black, except for two eyes that blinked, once and never again. Marcus turned away, heart pounding so hard he thought it would crack his ribs. The whispering was louder now, the voices fighting for space inside his head. He stumbled into a clearing. The fog parted, and there it stood again, the house. Not ash, not burned. Whole, pristine, perfect, but wrong, taller, wider, breathing. Its siding pulsed. The chimney twitched. The door was open, just slightly, and something inside was humming, low, guttural, and wet. The air around it shimmered like heat waves on pavement. He wasn't alone. Across the clearing people stood. 10 of them, maybe 12. Each one frozen in place, eyes locked on the house. Mouths slightly open, faces slack. One was the mailman. Another was Mr. Reeves from the post office. There was the waitress from the diner, her apron still stained with coffee. All of them were swaying, just slightly, in unison, like puppets caught in a breeze no one else could feel. Then, as one, they turned to face Marcus. No expression, no blinking, just watching. He backed up. A twig snapped underfoot. The sound was too loud in the stillness. The figures twitched at once, their heads cocking to the side like dolls reacting to sound, and then they rushed him. No scream, no warning, just movement. He ran. Branches slashed his arms. Roots caught his feet. But he ran. He didn't know how long he ran. The woods bent in on themselves. Paths looped. Trees grew from nowhere. The fog moved faster than wind should allow, rolling ahead of him now, guiding him somewhere. And then the ground dropped out from under him. He fell. Not far, just enough to slam against wet earth and knock the breath from his lungs. When he looked up, the trees were gone. The fog thinned. He was on a street, Main Street. Ashthorne, back in town. But something was wrong. It was daylight. Too bright, too clean. The sky was blue, the clouds cotton white, birds chirped. Children played. But no sound came from it. No wind, no breath. Like watching a memory on mute, he stood slowly blinking. People walked by, smiling, waving. They all looked familiar, too familiar. And then he saw himself, walking on the other side of the street, holding groceries, laughing, walking next to Lena, the real Lena. She was smiling, glancing at him. Their hands touched, a casual moment. Then the vision flickered, their faces melted into each other. Eyes wept black, skin slithered, bones snapped, the street cracked, the sky darkened. A voice, louder than thunder, split the silence. "You're already part of it." And the town collapsed. He screamed as the buildings twisted inwards, folding into themselves like paper in fire. The people peeled apart, faces turning to smoke. The ground swallowed itself, a great mouth opening wide beneath him. And at the center of it all, rising from the hole, the house. Again, always. But this time it had his front door, his house. He woke in bed, drenched in sweat. Daylight. Real. Maybe. His heart raced. He sat up. He wasn't alone. Lena stood in the corner, smiling, and behind her, the hallway was longer than it should have been. He blinked, and the walls breathed. Marcus didn't move. He sat frozen on the edge of his bed, lungs straining for breath, watching Lena, his sister, the thing in her skin, standing in the corner with that smile carved too deep into her face. Her eyes were wrong again. Too wide, too still. The kind of stare that didn't blink because it didn't need to. The hallway behind her twisted unnaturally long, stretching in a way no architecture should allow, the walls breathing with a pulse that matched the pressure in his ears. His bedroom light flickered once, then steadied, casting her shadow along the warped doorway. Only it wasn't her shadow. It moved differently, slower, arms longer, mouth opening silently. Marcus stood up slowly, not speaking. He didn't trust his voice not to crack, not to betray the complete emptiness rising in his chest. Lena's eyes followed him as he crossed the room, every muscle in his body wired, so tight it felt like his bones might snap. She didn't speak. She just tilted her head slightly, like she was waiting. For what? He didn't want to know. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. Dead. No battery. He hadn't even used it. He checked the window. Still dark out. Maybe 3 in the morning. The streets outside looked normal, quiet. But quiet wasn't safe anymore. Quiet meant something was listening. He looked back at her. She still hadn't moved. Still smiling. Still watching. That same unbearable silence pressed around them, a bubble just seconds away from popping. He opened his mouth to speak, to say anything that might break the spell, but the hallway behind her shifted again. He saw it, clear as day. The wallpaper rippled like water. The floor dipped for half a second, like something huge and heavy had moved just beneath it. And then the smell hit him, faint at first, sweet, rotten, familiar, the scent of the basement, of the chair, of the blood-soaked soil that steamed even in the cold. He knew, with absolute certainty, that the thing standing in front of him wasn't Lena. He had known before. But this moment stripped away all lingering hope. The house hadn't just followed him. It had merged with him, with his home, with his life. It wasn't bound to one place anymore. It was inside. It had roots now. Roots in the wood, in the wiring, in the very layout of the town. That dream, or vision, whatever it was, hadn't been a nightmare. It had been a warning, a map, one he hadn't understood in time. He stepped toward her, slowly, carefully. Her eyes didn't leave his face. "Are you afraid of me now?" she asked. Her voice was soft, not mocking, almost gentle. "I want to talk," Marcus said, surprised his voice didn't tremble. Her head tilted the other way. "We've been talking." "No," he said. "You've been watching, following, twisting everything. But you haven't answered anything." She blinked. Once, twice. Then, slowly, she sat down in the armchair across from the bed, like a guest settling in for tea. "What do you want to know?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. His mouth opened. Too many questions at once. Why Lena? Why the town? Why him? Why now? What are you? She looked up at the ceiling, as if considering it. "I'm old," she said. "Older than the house. Older than the trees. I was here before names. Before maps. Before the town wore its first name and buried the old one. You were trapped in that house." "I wasn't trapped," she said, shaking her head. "I was kept, fed, hidden. It was a pact. A quiet one. Old blood keeps old promises. What broke it?" he asked. She smiled wider. "You did." His stomach twisted. "When I found Lena. When I brought her back." "You brought back more than her," she said. "You brought back a doorway." The body was a key, but the grief was the invitation. His knees nearly gave. He sat on the bed again. "You used her. I am her," she said. "Every memory you shared, every secret, every laugh, I know them. I carry them. She's not gone. She's folded." "Where is she?" His voice cracked now. "Where is my sister?" "She's in the room," she said, screaming. "But you won't hear her unless I let you. And I won't. Not yet." Rage flared in him so fast it shocked him. He stood again, fists clenched. "Let her go." "No," she said simply. "Because she's not done being useful." "What do you want from me?" She stood too. The smile faded slowly, like a mask slipping off. "You're going to help me grow." He felt the pressure in his head increase. A soft ringing started in his ears. Something in the walls groaned. And then, just for a moment, the hallway behind her changed. It split. A new hallway, where there hadn't been one before, opened into darkness. "You've seen the rooms," she whispered. "There are many. This house wants more rooms, more halls, more doors. I won't help you." She smiled again. "You already are." She turned, walked into the new hallway, and disappeared. The light flickered once and steadied. Marcus was alone. But not really. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed until the sun rose, half expecting the door to open again. But it didn't. When he finally stood, the hallway was normal again. Or at least it looked normal. The house didn't breathe anymore. The walls didn't ripple. He walked through it like someone pacing a crime scene, checking each room, opening every closet, staring into mirrors longer than he should have. Everything looked right, which only made it worse, because now he couldn't trust anything. He drove into town. Ashthorne was different. On the surface it was the same buildings, same streets, same sleepy rhythm, but people moved slower. Faces looked drained. Conversations whispered instead of spoken. Windows were kept shut now, curtains drawn. And at the center of it all, standing on the church lawn in broad daylight, was the white chair, the one from the basement. Clean, polished, empty, and the grass around it was dead. Marcus pulled over, got out of his car, walked across the lawn. No one stopped him. No one looked up. The chair sat there like it belonged, like it had always been there. He reached out, touched it, cold. Ice cold despite the sun. A voice behind him made him jump. "She put it there this morning." He turned. It was Mayor Halstead. Pale, eyes sunken, suit wrinkled and stained. Who? Marcus asked, though he already knew. The girl, your sister. Or whatever she is now. She's not my sister, Marcus said flatly. The mayor nodded. No, she's something else. You've seen it too. We all have, Halstead said. Some of us pretend not to. It's easier that way. But the fog doesn't go away. The dreams don't stop. Marcus looked around. Why aren't you doing anything? Why isn't anyone fighting back? Halstead's hands trembled. He looked older than he had last week. Older by years, because we've tried before. And every time we fight it, we lose something. Someone. And every time, it gets closer. Closer to what? To being permanent. That word hit Marcus like a slap. Permanent. No longer a visitor. No longer a shadow. A rooted presence. A home. She wants to plant herself, the mayor said. She wants the town to become hers. Marcus looked back at the chair. She said, I'm helping her. You are, Halstead said. But maybe you still have a chance to choose how. Marcus stared at the chair, at the empty seat, at the dead grass curling around its legs. She said, Lena's still inside, he said softly. The mayor's face twitched. Then she's suffering. And you should end it. Marcus didn't reply. He looked at the chair one last time and walked away. But in the back of his mind, he heard the voice again. You're going to help me grow. And for the first time, he wondered. What if he already was? Marcus didn't go home that night. He couldn't. Not while that thing was still wearing his sister's skin, still sleeping, or pretending to sleep, beneath the same roof. Instead, he drove aimlessly for hours, letting the narrow roads outside Ashthorne wind around him like a noose. The deeper he went into the outskirts, the more the radio cut in and out with whispers that didn't match any station. At first, he thought it was his mind playing tricks again. But then the voice said his name, twice, and he shut the radio off, heart pounding so hard it made his vision blur. He needed air, answers, anything that wasn't fog and rot, and peeling walls that breathed. He pulled off the road near the old cemetery, climbed out, and let the cold night wrap around him. The graves were ancient. Most of the names were worn away by rain and time, but some still stood tall, newer, names he recognized, friends, neighbors, victims. And at the far edge, where the stones grew sparse and crooked, he found one that stopped him cold. Lena Grace Daniels, his sister, carved in stone. Died October 12th, 3 weeks ago. Marcus dropped to his knees. His mouth went dry, fingers tracing the letters like they would flake off and reveal a mistake. But they didn't. The grave was real. The earth undisturbed. A bouquet of rotting lilies rested at the base of the stone, petals browned and curling inward like hands. Someone had buried her. Someone had held a service, and no one had told him. He staggered back, breath catching, nausea rising. Had it all been a lie? Had she really died out there in the woods, and everything since? The rescue, the return, the conversations, the quiet breakfasts, the smiles, all of it her. Had it been the creature all along? Then who held the funeral? He spun around, eyes searching for anything, any movement in the dark. His skin prickled. The cemetery was too quiet, not peaceful, hollow. Even the wind seemed to skirt around it, like nature itself refused to disturb the ground. And then he saw it, another figure, standing 2 rows over, half shrouded in shadow. An old woman, still watching. He didn't recognize her. Gray hair tucked beneath a black scarf, long dress brushing against the cracked stone. Her face was sharp, weathered, but her eyes, they burned, as if something behind them remembered things he shouldn't. You came too late, she said. Her voice didn't match her size. It was low, dry, and scraped across the air like broken glass. Who are you? Marcus asked. I'm the one who buried her. His throat tightened. Why? Why didn't anyone tell me she was dead? She stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Because you weren't supposed to see her again. He stepped back. She came back. You're telling me she died, and that thing. It wears her, the woman said, cutting him off. That's what it does. It finds grief and takes the shape of what was lost. That's how it survives. How do you know all this? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted past him, to the woods beyond the graves. Because I was the last one who fought it. Before you. Silence dropped between them like a blade. Marcus stared. You've seen it before. I've buried it before, she whispered. Twice. And each time, it came back, changed. Smarter, he shook his head. The mayor said there was a pact. That it used to be fed hidden.
Why?
Because the people of Ashthorn are cowards, she snapped. They saw the cost of fighting it and chose quiet suffering instead. Keep it contained, they said. Let it feed small, a death here, a vanishing there. Better than war. And you didn't agree. I tried to burn it, she said. Just like you did. But it wasn't ready to be destroyed. It wasn't full yet. Marcus remembered the scream in the basement, the writhing face beneath Lena's skin, the house rebuilding itself even after the fire. What is it? A seed, she said. That's the best word I've found. Not a demon, not a ghost. Something older, something planted. It waits until the soil is right. Then it grows. And now the soil is Ashthorn, he whispered. She nodded. And you're the gardener. He felt the sting of guilt slam into his ribs. I didn't know. No. But you opened the door. And now it's inside. I want to stop it. She studied him, long and cold. Then you have to kill her. He blinked. What? You can't save her. There's nothing left to save. Every hour she stays in that body, the roots grow deeper. The memories fade. She becomes less of what she was, and more of it. There's a window. A short one. Before she's gone completely. Marcus swallowed hard. How do you know she's still in there at all? Because it keeps her alive, the woman said. It feeds on who she was, her memories, her pain, her love for you. It needs her emotions to anchor itself to the town. If I kill her, you cut the anchor. He looked down at the grave again. The name carved into stone. The finality of it. Could he do it? Could he drive a blade into his sister's chest, even knowing she wasn't herself anymore? When? He asked. Soon. Or not at all. Once it's strong enough, it won't need the body. It'll make its own. What happens then? The woman turned toward the woods. Then the town becomes the house. He felt his stomach drop. You said you tried before, she nodded. And I failed. How? I waited too long. Before he could respond, she walked away. No goodbye, no explanation. She disappeared between the tombstones, swallowed by the fog that rose suddenly and without warning. Marcus stood alone, the grave at his feet, the cold biting through his jacket. The name stared up at him like a judgment. Lena Grace Daniels. He didn't go back to his house that night. He couldn't face her. Not yet. Not until he was sure. He needed time. Answers. A plan. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He drove to the old church. The doors were locked, but he broke the side window and climbed in. The sanctuary was dusty, pews long abandoned, altar cracked and faded, but the stained glass windows still stood, and moonlight filtered through the reds and blues like blood on water. He sat in the front pew, head down, fingers laced, not praying, just trying to remember who he was before all of this. A sound behind him made his heart stutter. Footsteps, soft, deliberate. He turned. A boy stood in the aisle, 8, maybe 9, pale, barefoot, eyes sunken, lips blue. Marcus stood slowly. Hey kid, are you okay? The boy didn't speak, just stared. Marcus took a step closer. Then the boy opened his mouth, and dozens of voices came out at once, all screaming. Marcus stumbled back, hitting the pew behind him, as the boy's skin began to crack. Black tendrils pushed through his chest, writhing like worms in fire. His face peeled back. Not blood, but darkness underneath. No skull, no organs, just void. The church trembled. And the voices whispered one phrase over and over. She remembers too much. The boy collapsed into ash, and the stained glass shattered. Shards of colored glass rained down around Marcus like frozen rain, slicing across his arms and face in 100 shallow cuts. The church groaned above him, an old beast waking after decades of silence. The shattered windows let in the wind for the first time in years, and it didn't howl like wind should. It moaned. Deep and long and wet, as though something beneath the foundation was breathing through the walls. Marcus staggered backward from the center aisle, his boots crunching over broken glass, trying not to slip in the ash. The boy, if it had ever been a boy, was gone. Only a faint shape of him remained in the suits scattered across the floorboards. But Marcus could still hear the voices, not screaming now, but muttering, mumbling his name in layers of static. She remembers too much. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't even go outside. He stayed in the church, slumped against the altar, knees pulled to his chest, eyes on the collapsed stained glass like it might put itself back together if he watched long enough. But nothing changed. No dawn came. No birds. Just the quiet hum of something old and cruel taking root deeper into the town. The phrase haunted him. She remembers too much, because it meant something that he hadn't dared to hope. Lena was still there. Somewhere inside that thing that smiled through her teeth. When the sun finally returned, weak and filtered through fog that refused to lift, Marcus stepped out of the church and into a town that no longer blinked. The people he passed looked the same, but moved slower. Their eyes seemed too small for their sockets. Expressions hung on their faces like masks beginning to slip. No one spoke. No one waved. A man stood at a corner holding a newspaper upside down, staring at it with a blank smile. Two girls played hopscotch in perfect silence, drawing squares in chalk made from something too dark to be dust. A dog barked somewhere behind a fence, over and over, without pause. Marcus walked fast. He needed answers. Not from books or whispers, but from someone who had seen what he saw. The old woman from the graveyard. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she lived. But she had buried Lena, had seen the thing before, and more importantly, had survived it. He went to the only place old enough to know everyone, the library. It was still standing, though the front door was warped, like it had swollen in the night. Inside, the lights flickered, and the air stank of mildew and burnt paper. Half the shelves were empty. The others sagged. But the town registry still sat behind the front desk, a leather-bound book thicker than a cinder block. He flipped through the pages, fingers raw from cold, until he found the name scratched in ink and faded pencil. Eleanor Vex. Listed as caretaker of the old Holler house, up near Crescent Hill. The name meant nothing to him, but the location did. That stretch of land was where the town first began, back before the name Ashthorne even existed. Before the fires, before the silence. He stole a bike from behind the drugstore, no one was watching, and pedaled out of town. The fog stayed with him, but lighter now, as if it had what it needed and was merely observing him, judging his next move. The road narrowed as he climbed toward Crescent Hill, the trees growing too close together, their branches scraping the air like fingers dragging across a ceiling. The air got colder, thinner. And then, suddenly, the trees broke, and there it was, the old Holler house. It sat crooked, one corner sunken. The porch tilting like it had one last breath left in it. But the windows were lit. Dim yellow light glowed through old lace curtains. Smoke curled from the chimney. He knocked once, twice. The door opened before he could knock a third time. Eleanor stood there, wrapped in a dark shawl. Eyes too clear for someone so old. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said. "You look like you've been chewed on by the dead." He entered without a word. The house smelled of herbs, dried flowers, and something metallic beneath it all. She led him to the back room, where an old stove crackled and photographs lined the mantel. Some were black and white, others moved. He did a double take, unsure if it was a trick of the light, but one photo showed the white house. The house, and its door pulsing, just slightly, as if breathing. "You saw it, didn't you?" Eleanor said, stirring something in a black kettle. "I saw her," Marcus replied. Eleanor didn't look up. "And you still think it's her?" "I want to," he admitted. But I don't. You're ahead of most, she muttered. The town fools itself faster every time. Used to take weeks. Now it takes hours. What is it? He asked again, desperate. Eleanor looked at him now, her expression hard. A seed, like I said, but not planted by man. It's a thing from underneath, from before. It sleeps, then wakes, then moves. It mimics. It learns. It remembers, not the way we do, but by absorbing. Stealing. You ever wonder why Ashthorne doesn't have any written history before 1837? He blinked. What? Every record before that year is gone. Burned, torn, lost. Ask the town hall. They'll say flood, fire, mold, but they're lying. Or they've forgotten too. Why 1837? She pulled a small photo from a drawer and handed it to him. The picture was too faded to make out clearly, but he could see a woman, bound to a chair, eyes open, screaming. She was the first, Eleanor said, the one who went looking for her lost brother, and she found him. But he wasn't himself anymore. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. They reversed it. They killed him, she said, and the house vanished for 40 years. He set the photo down. So it's like a cycle. It's more than that, she said. It learns every time. It adapts. It takes the rules we use against it and bends them. That's why I failed. I used old methods. Fire, salt, prayers. Useless. This time, it's using you. Marcus stood. Then tell me how to stop it. She turned to him fully now, eyes sharp as needles. You want to kill it. You have to go deeper than the house. Deeper than Lena. You have to find where it sleeps. Before the house. Before the woods. Before us. He frowned. I thought it was the house. She shook her head slowly. No. The house is a mouth. You want to end this, you find the throat. A knock at the door froze them both. Once, twice. Then a pause. Then again, 3 times, faster. Eleanor's face turned pale. She found us. The door creaked open before either of them could move. A breeze rolled in, thick with that same rotting sweetness. Then came the voice, low. Familiar. Marcus. Come home. You left the stove on. It was Lena, outside. Calling like it was any normal day. But Marcus knew, in that moment, the town was no longer his. It belonged to her now. Marcus didn't move as her voice slid through the cracks in the door. It was soft, measured. The exact tone Lena would have used if she were reminding him to turn off the lights before bed. But beneath it, buried just enough to pass as human, was the tremble of something else. Something trying too hard to be gentle. Eleanor held up a hand to silence him and pressed her back to the wall. Her breathing had gone shallow, and her eyes flicked toward the floorboards like she could hear something crawling underneath them. Marcus, the voice said again, slower now, I made breakfast. Your favorite. He wanted to scream, to answer, to throw open the door and grab her and shake her until something snapped and the real Lena came spilling back through her eyes. But he stayed still. The silence of the old house wrapped around them like wool. Outside, the wind had stopped. No birds, no crickets, no sound at all, except for the faint hum beneath her words. A vibration in the walls, deep and steady, like the purring of something alive. Eleanor mouthed, Don't speak. Then footsteps, not on the porch, on the roof, slow, heavy, dragging. They circled the house once, then again, then silence. A long pause. Marcus felt sweat bead at the base of his spine, but he didn't dare move. Then, from the chimney, came a scraping sound, like nails on stone, a slow, patient descent. Eleanor moved first. She grabbed a rusted iron poker from beside the fireplace and handed it to Marcus with shaking hands. Then she lit a candle and motioned for him to follow. They moved through a narrow hall in the back, past walls lined with drawings, old ones, made in charcoal. Some showed figures bound to chairs. Others showed a house drawn over and over, each time with one more window than the last. At the end of the hall was a trapdoor. Eleanor opened it and climbed down first. The cellar was colder than outside. The air was thick with the smell of old stone and salt. The walls were covered in markings, words written in languages Marcus didn't recognize. Some looked burned into the rock, others carved with fingernails. Eleanor lit more candles, and their flickering light revealed a table at the center of the room. On it sat an old map of Ashthorne, but it wasn't the current map. It was older, much older. The town was smaller and in the center, not where the main square is now. But in what would have been untouched forest then, was a black ink blot labeled The Hollow. Marcus leaned over it, eyes scanning. What is this? Before Ashthorne was Ashthorne. It was called Hollow's End, Eleanor said, a mining settlement. But they didn't dig for gold. They were after something else. Coal. She shook her head. Bone. He stared at her. They found a pit, she said. A natural one. And inside, they found pieces. Things that didn't match. Teeth longer than your hand. Rib cages shaped like cages. Bones that hummed when touched. He remembered the breathing house. The heartbeat under the floor. What happened to it? They buried it, she said. They thought they could cover it. Hide it. But you can't bury something that feeds on being hidden. The dark is its blood. Secrets are its breath. Marcus felt dizzy. The house. That thing. It came from the pit. She nodded. It is the pit. The mouth of it. And every time someone gets too close, every time someone starts to remember, it opens again. He ran his hand over the map. His finger landed on his street, his house. And then he saw it, a faint circle, drawn in pencil, matching the exact curve of his neighborhood. It's under my house, isn't it? He whispered. Eleanor looked at him, eyes hollow. You moved into the newest extension of Ashthorne. You think that's a coincidence? Marcus stepped back, heart hammering. You were planted, she said, just like the seed. Then the cellar door above them creaked. Eleanor blew out the candles. Darkness swallowed them. The steps came slow, deliberate. Someone, or something, moving through the house. The air grew heavier with each creak. Marcus gripped the poker so hard his knuckles cracked. Then came the voice, not Lena's, lower, like a broken violin being dragged across rusted strings. You shouldn't have looked. The door to the cellar opened. A sliver of light spilled down. Marcus held his breath. He couldn't see the figure, only its shadow on the stairs. Long, thin, arms that reached too low, a silhouette that didn't match the voice, that didn't match anything. Eleanor reached into the darkness and pressed a cold, small object into Marcus's hand. A key. Go, she whispered. Through the back. Find the hollow. Burn it? What about you? She didn't answer. The figure on the stairs turned and began to descend. Marcus didn't wait. He ran. There was another hatch near the floor. He crawled through it, into the dirt, pushing himself under the house, the soil closing in around him like a grave. Roots clawed at his arms. Rocks tore his shirt. But he kept moving, dragging himself forward. The key clenched in his hand like a lifeline. When he emerged, the sun had gone. Fog pressed down like a blanket of wet wool. The house behind him was gone. Not burned, not collapsed. Gone. He stood in a clearing where it had been. Nothing but dead grass and a faint indentation in the ground. He didn't scream, he didn't cry. He just started walking. Back to town. Back to the beginning. Back to the throat. The town was wrong when he returned. Marcus felt it before he saw it. The air had thickened, heavy with moisture that shouldn't have been there. The fog was no longer rolling across the ground. It was rising, climbing the walls of buildings, sticking to windows like a second skin. And the silence had a shape now. It pulsed. A living thing you could almost see if you stared long enough into the space where sound should have been. The streets were nearly empty, but he knew better than to think the town had emptied. The people were still there. They were just inside. Listening, watching. Waiting. He passed the diner. The open sign still hung in the window, flickering on and off in sickly green light. A figure sat at the counter, back turned, head slumped as if sleeping. Marcus didn't stop. He knew better. He passed Mr. Cray's barber shop next, its blinds drawn, the faint sound of buzzing clippers cutting through the fog in an irregular rhythm. Sharp, then slow, then fast again. like someone was running them over skin that was already gone. Everywhere he looked, the buildings remained, but something beneath them had shifted. Like the town had been cracked and formed from memory alone, a dream of Ashthorn, half remembered and stitched together by a mind that had never truly lived here. Nothing fit quite right. The corner stores leaned too far forward. The pavement rippled underfoot. The street lamps bent in the middle like tired bones. He made it back to his street just after midnight, the key from Eleanor burning in his hand like it had soaked in the heat of the dead. The houses on either side of his were dark. His own, however, glowed from within, every window lit, every curtain drawn back, like it had been waiting for him. The porch light flickered. He stepped forward. The wood creaked beneath his feet, but not like wood should. It creaked in a rhythm, slow, patient, breathing. He put the key in the door. It turned without resistance. The moment he stepped inside, he knew this was no longer his house. It looked the same layout, same furniture, same pictures on the walls, but everything had been rewritten just slightly. The hallway was a few inches longer. The ceiling bulged in the middle like something heavy was lying just above it. The picture frames on the wall showed the same moments. His birthday, Lena at the lake, their mother smiling in the kitchen, but the eyes were all the same. Wide, glassy, too bright, like something else had looked through them and taken note of what it saw. "Welcome home," came her voice. He didn't jump. He'd expected it. Lena sat at the kitchen table, sipping from a mug. She was barefoot, wearing one of their mother's old sweaters, her hair tied back the way it used to be on slow Sundays. But her smile was too still, her face too pale, and something about the way she gripped the mug made his skin crawl. Her fingers were too long, or her hand too tight. He couldn't decide which. "You've been gone a while," she said gently. "I was worried." Marcus stepped into the living room and let the door close behind him. "I went looking," he said. "For what?" "For you," he replied. Her smile twitched. "But I'm right here." "No," he said, his voice flat. "You're not." Silence. Then she set the mug down carefully and leaned back in the chair. "So, what did she tell you?" "Enough," Marcus said. "She told me about the hollow, about the pit under this town, about the thing that feeds on memory, on grief, on us." Lena's smile didn't fade, but something behind her eyes tightened. "And you believed her?" she asked. "That shriveled old witch who lives with ghosts and whispers to the walls." "I believed what I saw," Marcus said. "I saw the grave. I saw your name. I saw the pit on the map. And I know what's under this house." "Then you know it's too late," she said. "No," he said. "Not yet." She stood. Slowly, her shadow stayed seated, then rose a few seconds later. "You don't understand what you're trying to fight," she said. "You still think this is about saving me. But I'm already gone. You're not fighting for my life. You're fighting to stop the next version of me." Marcus took a step forward. The floor rippled. "Then I'll kill it before it's born." "You can try," she said. "But what you don't see is that it wants you to fight. Every time someone resists, it learns, adapts, grows new limbs, finds new doors. Then maybe I'll shut the door for good." Lena tilted her head. "With that?" she said, nodding at the key in his hand. "You think a key made from rust and blood can lock a gate carved in bone? I think I have to try." The walls trembled. Paint peeled. Light bulbs popped, one by one. The entire house exhaled. Then she charged him. It didn't look like a lunge. It looked like she glitched. One moment across the room, the next inches from his face. Her mouth opened too wide. The voice inside her screamed not words, but frequencies. Sounds meant to break something inside the human brain. He reeled back, swung the iron poker from Eleanor's house, struck her jaw. It cracked. Not like bone, like shell. Her face peeled. A layer sloughed off like shedding skin. What remained wasn't Lena, wasn't even close. A face made of others, shifting, breathing, eyes that didn't match, mouths stitched over other mouths. It blood sound, not blood, and it kept coming. He turned and ran. Down the hall, past the picture frames that now whispered his name. Into the basement. The steps warped as he ran. The walls bent inward, dripping something black and cold. The air thinned. At the base of the stairs, he found it. The trapdoor. It hadn't been there before. But now it waited. The key burned hotter in his hand. He drove it into the lock. It clicked. The door opened, and the smell hit him like a blow to the chest. Earth, wet, rot, and something else. A scent like grief, like sorrow made physical. The smell of dying memories. Of childhood toys forgotten. Of faces you couldn't recall anymore. He dropped into the dark without thinking. The door slammed shut above him. He was falling. Not downstairs. Not down a tunnel. He was falling through memory. The walls around him played scenes from his life. Out of order, reversed, twisted. His mother dying in the hospital. Lena's 6th birthday. His father's fist breaking the kitchen door. All of it wrong. Voices changed. Faces blurred. The deeper he fell, the more he forgot. He hit the ground hard. When he opened his eyes, he was in a vast cavern. Stone walls that pulsed. A ceiling too high to see. And ahead of him, the hollow. Not a pit. Not a cave. A mouth, open, breathing, lined with doors. Hundreds. Thousands. And one of them had Lena's name carved into it. He stepped forward. And something behind him whispered, "Choose carefully." Some doors opened both ways. The hollow was not quiet. It breathed. It murmured. It shifted. Marcus stood at the threshold of something older than language, and it spoke to him in things no words could hold. Weight, pressure, memory, decay. The air inside wasn't cold or warm, but familiar. Like a room from your childhood that had been boarded up for years, and now something else had made a home in it. Doors lined the cavern walls, stretching up into the darkness beyond sight, stacked in patterns that made no architectural sense. Some were tall and skeletal, made of bone lashed together with twine. Others looked like bedroom doors. One with glow, in the dark stickers peeling off. One with a brass doorknob smudged by years of fingerprints. Each door had a name. Not all names were legible. Some were scratched out. Others blurred as he stared at them, like they didn't want to be remembered. But one stood out, center, level with the ground, outlined in pulsing red veins that throbbed like arteries. Lena Grace Daniels, Marcus stepped toward it. The ground beneath his feet felt like dried muscle, flexing as he moved. He reached for the handle, but the moment his fingers touched it, something rippled through him. A memory, no, a distortion, rose in his mind. Lena in the hospital bed, machines beeping, wires running into her arms. He was 10, she was 8. The doctors told them it was pneumonia, but their mother had cried too hard for it to be something simple. Except that never happened. Did it? He let go of the door and the memory vanished. The hollow wasn't just physical. It reached inside him, warped what he knew, rewrote it. The moment he connected to the door, it began to copy, to infect, to replace. Marcus took a breath and gripped the handle again, forcing himself to focus. On Lena, on her laugh, not her shadow. On the way she always ran up the stairs 2 at a time, afraid of whatever she believed lived under them. On the way she used to sing under her breath when she thought no one was listening. He opened the door. Darkness. Then, a bedroom. Their childhood bedroom. Clean, neat. The glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon spilled across the carpet. 2 beds, posters on the walls. The air smelled like old crayons and warm laundry. And Lena. She sat on the edge of the bed, legs swinging, wearing her old pajamas, the ones with the dancing ghosts. Her hair was longer, younger, her eyes wide and hollow. "Marcus?" she asked. He stepped inside. "Lena." She looked up at him, startled. "You're not supposed to be here." He took a step closer. "Neither are you." Her head tilted. "It's coming soon. I can feel it behind the walls." "I know," he said softly. "I came to find you. To pull you out." She looked at him, tears welling. "It hurts, Marcus. All the time. Like it's eating me, but it leaves just enough to keep chewing." He knelt in front of her. "Then let me help." She reached up slowly and touched his face. Her hand was warm, real. Her eyes were her own, for the first time in what felt like lifetimes. But then her pupils dilated. Her smile snapped back in place like a mask pulled tight. And her voice, no longer hers, said, "You're too late." The walls of the bedroom groaned, split. From behind the closet door came a sound like flesh tearing. The bed stretched, warped, turned inside out. Lena was gone. The nightlight flared and popped. Darkness rushed in like water. Marcus stumbled back into the hallway of the hollow. The door slammed shut behind him, and this time it had his name carved into it. Marcus Elijah Daniels. His chest went tight. He turned and found himself no longer alone. Figures lined the hallway now, silent, watching. They weren't monsters, not at first glance. They were people. A man with no mouth. A child holding a balloon made of stitched skin. A woman with her face painted like a clown, eyes gouged and still smiling. They didn't move, but behind them, the sound of something wet dragging across stone. It was coming. He ran. Past doors that whispered names he almost recognized. Past frames that reached for him with hinges like fingers. The air became thicker, harder to breathe. The ground buckled beneath him, rising and falling with every beat of the thing buried deep below. At the end of the hallway was a spiral staircase leading down. No doors now. Just the sound of wind that wasn't wind. He descended. The spiral went on forever. The walls became flesh, then bone. Then a texture that had no name, only feeling, like shame soaked in vinegar. At the bottom, a chamber. Round, wet, and in the center, a cradle, not wooden, not metal, a cradle made of ribs. And inside it something almost human, small, swaddled. Breathing, he stepped closer. The thing turned its head toward him. It had no face, just empty skin. But he felt it looking. And then it spoke, not aloud, inside him. "You cannot kill what was born in memory. You cannot destroy what lives in the cracks of your grief." Marcus raised the poker. His hands shook. "You love her," it said, "and that love feeds me." He swung the poker down. The cradle screamed, not sound, but heat. Light exploded. The world twisted. The hollow convulsed. Marcus was thrown backward. When he opened his eyes, he was in his living room. Alone. Night. His arms burned. The poker gone. He looked down. There were two names scratched into his skin. Lena Marxus, and beneath them, etched deeper than either, a third name he didn't recognize. Vitra, and the room began to breathe again. Marcus didn't remember standing up. One moment, he was lying on the floor of his living room, staring at the names carved into his arms, trying to understand how they got there. And the next, he was at the window, pulling back the curtain with trembling fingers. Outside, the street looked the same. His neighbors' houses sat quiet and undisturbed, but something in the sky was wrong. The stars were missing. Not hidden by clouds, missing. The sky was blank, stretched flat and black like someone had torn down the night and painted over it. There was no wind, no noise, not even the faint hum of the old streetlight at the corner. He stepped away from the window and looked back at the walls. They had changed. The wallpaper had curled in on itself, folding in symmetrical spirals like veins exposed under skin. The air smelled like rust and old paper, like forgotten pages left in a wet basement. He turned and faced the hallway. It was longer again. Not by much. Just enough that he knew it wasn't a trick of perspective. Just enough to remind him that the house still wasn't truly his. And then the voices started, not from the hallway, not from inside his head, from the walls themselves. "Vitara sees you. The breath in your lungs was borrowed. You cannot leave what remembers you." Marcus staggered backward. His foot hit the coffee table. He dropped to one knee, clutching his chest. The words weren't being spoken. They were being imprinted. They bloomed in his mind like black flowers, blooming one after the other, pushing out thoughts of Lena, of the house, of the world before. He tried to focus, tried to remember the smell of their backyard, the way his sister used to chase fireflies in the summer. But it was slipping. Memory was being unraveled, thread by thread, replaced with something that didn't belong to him. He grabbed a pen from the drawer, the first thing he could find, and wrote the name down on the wall in big, shaky letters, Vitere. If it was trying to take over, then he needed to face it, name it, understand it. But as soon as he finished the last letter, the wall shuddered, the paint bubbled, the plaster cracked, and the letters twisted before his eyes, warping into something unreadable. He stepped back, heart pounding, and watched as the wall began to bleed. A slow, black drip from the center of the name, thick and tar, like sliding down the wallpaper. There was a knock at the door. Marcus turned too fast, nearly losing his balance. The knock came again, soft, deliberate. 3 short taps. Then silence. He didn't move. The door handle jiggled. And then a voice, sweet and familiar. "Marcus, it's me." "Lena," he backed away slowly. "Please," she said. "You don't understand what you're doing. It's not what you think." "I'm still here." He didn't answer. "You think you're saving me. You think this is about good and evil, light and dark. But it's not. It's about memory, about weight. You remember me as something pure, something worth saving. But I wasn't, Marcus. I never was." The door creaked open. She stood there, silhouetted by nothing. There was no world behind her, just blankness. No porch, no street, just void. Lena stepped inside. Her eyes weren't glowing. She didn't hiss. She didn't lurch. She looked normal, pale, tired. Her hands trembled. Her voice shook. "I tried to hold on," she said. "When it got in, I fought. I clung to everything. Our birthdays, the lake, Mom's perfume, the way you always hummed when you brushed your teeth. But it took them from me, Marcus, one by one, until all that was left was the shape of me." And it stepped inside. Marcus stared at her. "What is it?" She looked down at the black smear spreading along the floorboards. "Vitara," she whispered. "That's what it calls itself now. But it's worn other names. It's not a demon, not a god. It's a wound." "A wound," she nodded. "A tear in the fabric. A bruise on the skin of the world. It can't be killed because it was never alive. It can only be remembered. And every time we speak its name, it grows." Marcus glanced back at the wall where he had written the name. It was gone now. Just rotting plaster. "Why me?" he asked. Lena met his eyes. "Because you came back. Because you remembered me when no one else did. Because you still carry all of it inside you. And it needs that. It needs a vessel that feels everything." He felt the truth in her words hit like a stone dropped into still water. He had always been the one who couldn't let go, who memorized every detail, who rewound time in his head over and over, trying to fix what had already shattered. The perfect host. Lena stepped closer. Her hands reached for him. "You still have a chance," she said, "to end this, but not the way you think, not with fire, not with iron." "How then?" "You have to forget me," she whispered. "Erase every trace, every memory, every image. You have to make the world believe I never existed." "No," he said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," she said. "The more you hold on, the tighter it digs in. That's why it used me, because you wouldn't let me go." He shook his head, eyes stinging. "I can't. You must." Then the walls groaned. The house lurched. Lena dropped to her knees, clutching her head. Her skin cracked at the corners, leaking light. Marcus backed away, the world shifting around him. The furniture twisted. The ceiling stretched. Doors appeared where windows had been. The house was no longer a house. It was a memory. His memory, being torn apart and rebuilt. And at the center of it all was Vitara. He felt it before he saw it. A presence behind the hallway walls, watching, breathing, waiting. Then, from every direction, "You will remember. You will carry me. You will become me." Lena screamed. And Marcus made his choice. He ran to the garage, to the old boxes, photographs, tapes, school papers, everything he had ever saved. And one by one, he set them on fire. He erased her face from every page, every frame, every trace, and with every flame, the house shrieked. The walls blood, the lights died, and Lena's voice grew fainter, until, finally, the silence returned, real silence. No breath, no hum, no whisper. Marcus stood alone in the smoke, surrounded by ashes that no longer meant anything, and when he looked at his arm, the names were gone. Even his own. Marcus stood in a house that didn't know his name. The smoke had settled, and the fire had gone out, but the damage wasn't the kind you could see. Not anymore. The walls remained upright. The furniture sat still. But the air around him buzzed with a silence that wasn't passive. It watched. The rooms no longer welcomed him. The house had lost its warmth, not because something evil lived in it, but because something essential had been cut out. And Marcus could feel the absence like a missing limb. Every corner he turned, he expected her. Every silence he heard, he listened for her voice. But she was gone, not dead, not possessed, not waiting behind a door. Gone. Because he had made her that way. He stepped into the hallway and didn't recognize it. The pictures on the wall were gone, replaced by pale rectangles where frames had once hung. He reached for the light switch and paused when he noticed his hand, clean, whole, but bare of ink. The names that had been carved into his skin were gone, even his own. No scar, no memory, no proof that they had ever been there. He flicked the light switch and nothing happened. He found the mirror in the bathroom and stared into it, half expecting not to see himself. But he was still there. Same face, same eyes, same jaw clenched too tight. But there was something missing behind his expression, something blurred. He tried to remember what his sister's voice sounded like. It came in fragments, tones, breaths, but no words. He whispered her name. Nothing happened. No tremor in the walls, no hiss from the shadows, no black ooze sliding from the cracks in the floor. The house stayed still. He said it again, louder this time. Still nothing. He stepped back, heart pounding. Not in fear, but in grief. The kind of grief that doesn't howl. The kind that sits. The kind that buries itself deep and doesn't ask to be let out. The kind that builds a home in the hollow parts of your chest. The cost of the decision was beginning to settle in. He hadn't just lost her. He had erased her. If the only way to destroy Vitara's grip was to forget the ones it used, then Lena had been sacrificed to stop the seed from blooming. But even as he stood in the stillness of his own home, Marcus felt it. Vitara wasn't gone. Only quiet. Only watching. Because the thing he had burned, the memories he had destroyed, weren't just Lena's. They were his. And whatever space they once filled had become a void. And voids invite occupation. The first signs came that night. He lay on the living room floor, too exhausted to sleep but too afraid to leave. The TV was off. No lights worked. The power hadn't returned since the incident in the hollow. He stared at the ceiling until his eyes adjusted to the dark. And then he saw the cracks. Tiny fractures that ran in lines across the plaster, growing in symmetrical curves, like roots. Or veins. They hadn't been there before. He closed his eyes. But in the silence, something whispered. Not a word. Not a name. Just a breath. And the breath was not his. He sat up fast. The room was still empty, but the air was colder. Not sharp, but ancient, like something had been exhaled from a lung that hadn't breathed in centuries. He stood, walked slowly to the hallway, and paused outside his bedroom door. It was open. He hadn't opened it. He stepped inside, and found the bed made, neatly, tightly. The scent in the room stopped him cold. Crayons, dryer sheets, rainwater on cement, a smell he couldn't place, and yet he knew it. Lena's room. Except it wasn't, because Lena didn't exist anymore. He backed out, but as he did, the corner of his eye caught something. A photograph, taped to the inside of the closet door. He didn't remember it being taken. He didn't remember taping it up, but there it was. 2 children, a boy and a girl, smiling on a swing set. He reached for it, but before his fingers touched the surface, the lights in the house exploded. Not popped, not flickered, exploded. Glass shattered down the hallway, the kitchen lights burst. The living room fixture spun once, hard, and fell, slamming into the floor with a wet thud. And then the hum returned, low, steady. A frequency that felt like it started in the spine and crawled its way forward until it pressed against the eyes. The house was no longer silent. It had started remembering, but not what Marcus feared. It wasn't remembering Lena. It was remembering itself. The original design, the first form, the foundation beneath the town. He ran to the basement. He had to know. He flung the door open and stared down into the dark. No stairs, just a slope, dirt packed tight, air that pulsed, and the sound, a slow heartbeat. The hollow was back, under his feet, not as a place, as a part of him. He collapsed onto the steps. The poker he had once used was lying beside the door, rusted now, crusted in black. He stared at it, unable to pick it up. Then came the voice, but not Lena's, not Vitara's, his own, from beneath the house. "You are the wound now." Marcus froze. The voice spoke again. "You cut her out, and now you are hollow, and I am the echo." He backed away, slamming the door shut, bolting it. He ran into the kitchen, poured himself water, drank nothing. The tap ran black. When he looked up at the kitchen window, he saw his reflection. Except it blinked a second too late, and its mouth didn't move when he whispered, "No." Marcus didn't sleep. The reflection in the window still stared back at him, just a fraction too late. Like it was waiting for something, waiting for him to forget what it was replacing. He moved away from the glass, but its image clung to him like fog on skin. Every time he blinked, he saw himself watching from somewhere else. And the longer he stayed in the house, the more it twisted around him, subtly, invisibly, the way a noose tightens without the weight even noticing. By morning, the sun had risen, or at least something like the sun. The light that filled the house was too yellow, like nicotine-stained memories, and it didn't cast shadows. The kitchen clock had stopped ticking. All 12 numbers had melted into one another, the hands spinning slowly in opposite directions. The hallway had grown again. 3 doors now, where there had always been 2. One of them was a perfect copy of his childhood bedroom. Down to the rip in the corner of the rug, the comics tucked under the bed, and the broken drawer in the dresser that still squeaked when pulled. But he hadn't lived in that room for more than a decade. He hadn't seen it in years. And yet here it was, exact in every detail, built from the inside of his head. Marcus backed out and slammed the door, heart pounding. He needed air. Real air. Not whatever filled the lungs of this house. Outside, the town looked wrong. Not twisted, not rotting, not monstrous. Worse, it looked normal. Normal in the way dreams do when they're just beginning to sour. The streets were clean. The trees stood tall and green. Children rode their bikes past the corner, but none of them looked at him. Not one. They passed by like he didn't exist. He called out, "Hello." One of the children paused, turned slowly, and smiled. But it wasn't a child's smile. It was too wide, too calm. The kind of smile a thing wears when it doesn't understand what teeth are for. The boy turned away and kept riding. Marcus walked fast, faster than he meant to. The town square came into view. The fountain still gurgled at its center, but the statue above it had changed. It wasn't the old war memorial anymore. It was something new, something smooth and faceless. A figure with no eyes, mouth open in a scream that didn't end. The plaque below read, "He who forgot." He staggered backward. No one else looked at the statue. They walked past it without flinching. A woman pushed a stroller with no baby in it. A man read a newspaper printed entirely in symbols Marcus couldn't read. A dog barked at a tree, over and over, though nothing was there. This wasn't ashthorn. It was a skin pulled over something else. He made it to the library. The door groaned open without touch. Inside, it smelled of dust and wet stone. The air was colder. The walls were lined with books that had no titles. Just blank spines, shelved in perfect rows. He pulled one at random. The pages inside were filled with names, not stories, not paragraphs, just names. Hundreds of them. Some he recognized. People from town, people from memory. Then he found his. Marcus Elijah Daniels, underlined twice in red ink. As he stared at the name, the ink blotted across the page, soaking the paper, spreading wider and wider until the name melted off the page completely. He dropped the book. A voice from behind him said, "You shouldn't be here." He spun. The librarian stood at the far end of the room, or what used to be the librarian. Mrs. Alcott, 90 years old, mostly blind, always humming to herself. But now her skin hung like damp cloth. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. When she walked, her feet didn't touch the floor. She glided. He started. She raised a hand. The books began to shake on the shelves. "Memories are not for the living," she said, voice like paper tearing. "They belong to Vitara now." He turned and ran. Out the doors. Into the street. Into the daylight that cast no shadows. But the town wasn't letting him leave. The roads had changed. Signs twisted into new shapes. Directions no longer pointed north or south, but to places called within, before, and no more. He tried the path back to his house, but it wasn't there. In its place stood a single door, floating upright in the center of a sack, with no walls around it. The same door he had seen in the hollow. He approached slowly. His breath steamed in the air, though the day was warm. There was a note pinned to the door with a rusty nail. "You remembered. You became. Now open." He reached for the knob. His hand trembled. Before he could touch it, a whisper spilled from the keyhole. "Behind this door is not what was, but what will be." He pulled his hand back. He wasn't ready. Not yet. He turned and ran again. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to find someone. Anyone who remembered what Ashthorne used to be. Someone who hadn't been rewritten. Someone who still carried their original shape. He went to the cemetery. If anyone remembered truth, it would be the dead. The grave markers stood crooked, but intact. He searched until he found Lena's. But it wasn't there. Instead, a new headstone stood where hers had once been. "Here lies Marcus Elijah Daniels." His blood turned to ice. He dropped to his knees. The grave was fresh, dirt still loose. He reached out, shaking, and scraped at the soil. And then, from within the grave, he heard a voice. His own, laughing, not joyfully, not cruelly, but like someone who had finally stopped pretending they weren't insane. The ground began to breathe. The soil pulsed. A hand, his hand, reached out of the dirt, clawing toward the light. Marcus stumbled back, and the headstone changed before his eyes. The name vanished, replaced by one word: Vitara. Marcus couldn't scream. The sound caught in his throat like a name he no longer recognized. He backed away from the grave, the loose soil collapsing underfoot, until his back hit another headstone. Cold, damp, real, too real. And that was the worst part. Everything felt real, even though every moment was wrong. The hand reaching from the dirt was his, pale, veined. Fingernails cracked in exactly the same way. It gripped the edge of the grave like someone crawling out of a dream that had gone on too long. Then it stopped. Fingers twitched once, twice, and slid back under the dirt like it had never been there. The grave fell still. The air was quiet again. But Marcus didn't move. His body was ice. His thoughts fractured. Something deep in his chest pulsed out of sync with his heartbeat, like there was a second rhythm now, buried beneath the original one. A new metronome, ticking in the voice of a place. Not a person, not a being. A place, a presence. Vitara, it had seen him. It had shown him, and it had made him part of the story. He rose slowly, knees shaking, and turned to look at the rest of the cemetery. The graves had changed. Names missing. Dates warped. Some of the markers had melted down to stone lumps, while others now bore epitaphs written in languages Marcus didn't recognize. One headstone simply read, "She who was remembered too long." Another said he dreamed with his eyes open. and dozens were blank, not empty, blank, as if memory had never grown there. He stumbled away, heading back toward the road, or what used to be the road. The paths were different now. Trees bent over the sidewalk like they were listening. The stop signs were no longer red, but a pale shade of skin, and the letters had curled into spirals. The town had passed the threshold. It wasn't becoming Vitara anymore. It was Vitara, and he was walking through his own mind. He remembered Eleanor's words, "You are the wound now." Back then, he thought it was metaphor, a warning. Now he knew better. Vitara had no shape of its own, no body, no mouth. It required a host. It used towns, it used houses, and now it was using him. Not because he was strong, but because he was soft in all the right places. Vulnerable in memory, rich in grief, dense with guilt. The perfect soil. The streets he walked were pieces of his life now. A corner store that once stood in their old neighborhood in Chicago. A bus stop from college. The dead-end road where he'd once kissed a girl he couldn't remember the name of. All of it rearranged in dream, logic, looping in on itself. Then came the voices, not from the air, from the sky. And the sky was no longer sky. It was mirror. Thousands of reflections hovered above the town, all of them Marcus, different versions. One crying, one bleeding, one laughing so hard his jaw cracked, one wearing Lena's face. They floated just out of reach, distorted by the curve of the heavens. He looked down. His shadow was gone. He wasn't casting one anymore. And when he lifted his hand, there was a moment. Just a breath, where it didn't follow. Panic surged through him. Not fast, not loud, it was slow, methodical. Like a rope being wrapped around a neck, one coil at a time. He ran, back to the town square. The statue had changed again. Now it was him, standing, arms open, mouth wide. But it wasn't stone, it was living flesh. Skin that twitched, eyes that blinked without lids, and the mouth whispered. He couldn't make out the words. They were in his voice, but spoken in a cadence not meant for human ears. He covered his ears, backed away, tripped over the curb and fell. And when he looked up, he was no longer in the square. He was in the forest, the clearing, the place where the house once stood. But the house was no longer white. It was red now, pulsing, covered in veins. The windows blinked. The door breathed. Marcus staggered to his feet. He knew this was where it had started. This was where he had found her, Lena, before she had become the mask, before the name Vitara had passed through his lips and carved itself into his skin. He stepped toward the house. The door opened before he touched it. Inside, the air was warm and wet. The walls were soft. The floor sank slightly underfoot, like walking on stomach lining. And at the far end of the hallway, on the same chair from the beginning, sat someone, himself. Or a version of him, clean, rested, smiling. Marcus stared. The version of himself looked up, then stood. "You finally made it." Marcus didn't speak. "There's no use fighting anymore." The other Marcus said, "You did the hard part. You forgot her. You let her go. You opened the door. Now you can rest." "I'm not done," Marcus whispered. Other Marcus smiled wider. "You are. You just don't know it yet." Behind him the hallway shifted, became longer. A new door appeared, glass, and inside, Marcus saw people, crowds, dozens, hundreds, all with his face. Living lives he never lived, sitting in classrooms, dying in alleys, waking up next to lovers he didn't remember. Each one a version. Each one another path Vitara could walk through. Another identity to try on. Another world to wear. He turned back to the other Marcus. "What happens if I don't let go?" The smile faded. Other Marcus stepped closer. "Then you become the mouth." And Marcus understood. If he resisted, Vitara would stop walking through him and start speaking through him. If he submitted, he'd vanish into the memory, whole like Lena had. Either way, he would be the ending. He turned toward the chair, sat down. The house pulsed. The walls folded inward. And somewhere far above, in the real world, a boy named Marcus Elijah Daniels was declared missing. 3 days later, the house was torn down. The ground beneath it burned. The town of Ashthorne held a candlelight vigil, even though no one could remember who it was for. And in the woods, a new door appeared. Waiting. Marcus woke in a bed that wasn't his. The ceiling above him was low, the plaster cracked, the fan spinning slow and uneven. The sheets smelled like detergent he didn't own. He sat up fast, heart racing, and froze. The room was familiar, painfully so. The window to the left, the narrow dresser against the wall, the small rug frayed at the corner. All of it belonged to his childhood. He was back in his old bedroom. Not the memory, door copy he had seen before, but the real one. The one from the house his family had abandoned years ago, after their mother's death. But that house had been torn down. He had watched it collapse. He had walked through the ashes. He stood slowly, legs trembling, and looked around. Every detail was precise. The smell of chalk dust from the time he hid schoolwork under the bed. The faint stain on the ceiling from a leaky roof. Even the scratch on the closet door, where Lena once carved her initials. He touched it, fingers brushing over the grooves. Except the letters were wrong, not LGD anymore. Now it read VIT. Marcus staggered back. The closet door creaked open on its own. Inside was not clothing, not boxes, not toys. It was him, standing, silent. This version was older, worn, skin pale, eyes blackened, lips sewn shut with coarse thread. It raised a hand slowly, pointing directly at Marcus's chest. A sharp pain shot through him, sudden and brutal. He clutched his shirt, gasping, and felt his heart skip, not one beat, but two rhythms. One his own, one deeper, slower, not human. The sewn mouth version stepped out of the closet. The stitches split as it spoke. You are the next room. Marcus stumbled back against the wall. No. Yes. The voice was wet, broken. Lena was the first door. You are the next. And when they open you, they will walk through. The version stepped closer. The smell of rot clung to it. Marcus tried to swing his arm, tried to strike it, but his hand passed through, like hitting smoke. And yet the pressure of its presence pressed against him all the same. You burned her to forget, it said, but forgetting only left space, and I am what fills it. The walls pulsed. The dresser groaned. The floor swelled like something alive crawled beneath the boards. Marcus's stomach turned. He couldn't breathe. He ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, through the front door, and out into a town that wasn't Ashthorne anymore. The streets were stretched thin, looping endlessly. Houses stacked on top of each other, doors upside down, windows in the grass. People walked backward, their faces turned inside out, still smiling. A bus drove past with no wheels, dragging itself across the road on screaming metal. Marcus stumbled through it all, clutching his chest. The second heartbeat growing louder with every step. He made it to the square again, but the fountain was gone. In its place stood the chair, the same white chair from the basement, from the church lawn, from the visions. Clean, waiting, and this time someone sat in it. Not Lena, not the other versions of himself. Someone new. A tall, thin figure in a coat that brushed the ground, hands folded neatly in its lap. Its face was smooth, not blank, not featureless. Smooth, like clay that hadn't been finished, and yet its head tilted toward him as if eyes really were watching. Marcus, it said. The voice was dozens at once. Male, female, chold. A chorus that hummed together. He froze. The figure leaned forward. You know my name. Say it. He clenched his jaw. Vitara. The name tasted wrong in his mouth. Bitter. Cold. The figure smiled, or something like it. The skin rippled, stretching, trying to mimic expression. Good. Names are doors, and doors are all I've ever needed. Marcus shook his head. Why me? Why now? Because you remembered, Vitara said. You wouldn't let her go. Grief is a hall. Every sorrow, every mistake, every night you rewound your mind until it bled. You built corridors. I only needed to walk them. He dropped to his knees, the pressure of its words crushing him like weight. Vitara stood. Its body stretched, thin as wires. Tall as buildings, flickering between human and not human. Ashthorn was soil. You are seed. Through you, I will not just feed, I will grow. I will spread. Every town that remembers grief will open to me. Every heart that clings too tightly will build me walls. No, Marcus whispered. I'll stop you. Stop me. The chorus laughed. You already built me. Every memory you refused to bury was a brick. Every name you spoke was a window. Every tear you shed was a nail. You can't stop me, Marcus. You can only choose how you'll open. The chair behind it creaked. Marcus turned, and for a moment he saw Lena there again, bound, face pale, eyes pleading. But when he blinked, it was him again. Bound, smiling. Waiting. The square cracked. The buildings bent inward. The townsfolk turned their heads all at once, smiling wider, eyes glowing faint. And from their mouths, all in unison, came the same word, Vitara. The world shook. The sky split. And Marcus felt the second heartbeat inside him finally sync with the first. He fell to the ground. And when he looked up, he was no longer in Ashthorn. He was in a room. A room with no doors, no windows, just a mirror. And in the mirror, he saw himself. But this time, it wasn't late. It wasn't wrong. It smiled when he smiled. It whispered when he whispered. And it said, perfectly in time with him, I am the hollow now. Marcus stood before the mirror, breathing hard, the glass fogging with each exhale. His reflection stared back in perfect rhythm, every movement aligned. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was no lag, no distortion, no second image waiting just out of sync. Yet that made it worse. He couldn't trust what he saw. The perfect echo was a trap, too sharp, too clean, too precise to be his. He raised his hand slowly, expecting the reflection to falter. But it didn't. It raised its hand the same way, fingers curling, palm trembling in perfect time. He whispered, this isn't me. The reflection whispered back, this has always been you. The words didn't pass through his ears. They crawled through his skull, pressing against the back of his eyes until his vision blurred. Marcus stumbled back, but the mirror didn't change. It wasn't glass anymore. It was deep. He saw layers behind it, corridors stacked one over another like infinite teeth, each filled with versions of himself. Some alive, some dead, some screaming, some laughing. All trapped in their own private Ashthorns, their own memories rethreaded into Vitara's design. He wanted to smash the glass, but the moment he thought it, the reflection smiled. Break me, and you will bleed, not glass, not bone, memory. Marcus squeezed his fists until his knuckles popped. He was shaking, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. But then, the second heartbeat began again. Slow, heavy, patient. And it wasn't coming from his chest anymore. It was coming from the walls of the room, the floor, the mirror itself. The whole place throbbed with the rhythm of something immense, something alive beneath all of this. Where am I? He demanded. His voice cracked. The reflection tilted its head. Where you've always been. In the hollow. In me. You are not outside. You are inside. You are another room. Another door. Marcus shook his head. I made you weaker. I burned her. I forgot her. Exactly, the reflection said. You hollowed yourself. And hollows must be filled. The mirror rippled. For a moment, Marcus saw something flicker across the surface. Lena's face. Then his own. Then his mother's. Then strangers he didn't know but felt like he should. Faces rising, sinking, dissolving. Each one swallowed in silence. Marcus reached for the glass, his fingertips brushing it. It was warm, flesh warm. It pulsed beneath his touch, and the moment he felt it, something inside him opened. He saw not memories, but rooms. Every moment of his life contained in architecture, the hallway of his first school. The kitchen where his father screamed. The lake where Lena slipped beneath the surface for too long. The hospital corridor where he thought he'd lose her the first time. They were all connected. Not separate. A single structure built out of his grief. The hollow wasn't a place beneath Ashthorn, it was him. You understand now, the reflection said. You built me. You are me. No, Marcus whispered. I'm not letting this happen. The reflection leaned close, pressing its palm against the other side of the glass. Then let me out. Let me wear you. Let me walk. And you can stay here safe, watching. Marcus's breath caught. Safe. That word hit harder than any scream. After everything, the fire, the screams, the empty streets, the thought of safety carved a crack in him. The reflection saw it, smiled. You don't have to fight anymore. Just give me the weight. Let me carry it. Let me walk for you. The heartbeat quickened. The walls leaned in. The mirror bulged forward, closer to his face until it was inches away. Marcus clenched his jaw. He wanted to break it, to swing his fist and shatter the glass. But if what it said was true, the shatter would only carve himself apart. Instead, he asked, "What's behind you?" The reflection paused. Its smile faltered. For the first time, it didn't answer. Marcus pressed harder. What's deeper than you? What's past the doors, past the rooms, past all of this? The reflection's skin rippled. Its face began to blur, sliding between features, scrambling to keep control. Marcus leaned in. You're not the end. You're not the root. You're just another mask. The reflection snarled. Don't ask what sleeps beneath. But the damage was done. The mirror cracked. Not fully, just a thin line running down the center, leaking a faint black mist that smelled of wet stone and rot. The reflection slammed its palms against the glass, eyes wide, voice breaking into hundreds of tones at once.
Don't open it! Don't look deeper! You'll drown us both!
The crack spread. The second heartbeat roared, shaking the room. Marcus fell back as the mirror exploded, shards flying past him. But they didn't cut his skin. They cut his mind. Each shard that struck him filled him with visions. The first settlers digging into the earth, bones that hummed when touched. The girl bound to the chair in 1837, Eleanor burying what she thought was the last seed, and Lena's face when she whispered, "Forget me." He collapsed to the ground, clutching his head, screaming. And when he opened his eyes again, he wasn't in the room. He was standing in a cavern, stone walls, wet earth, veins of red pulsing light, and at the center a pit. Not the hollow he had seen before, something deeper, something older, a hole so vast it had no bottom. It pulsed in time with his heart, and from within it voices rose, thousands, millions, screaming and whispering in unison. Not Lena, not Vitara, something else, something beneath. It whispered his name, not Marcus, not Daniel's, not anything he'd ever been called before. It whispered the name of the wound itself. And the moment he heard it, the world above began to crack. The sound wasn't like anything Marcus had heard before. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a scream. It was older than language. A pressure. A resonance that bypassed his ears and planted itself deep in the pit of his spine. It wasn't calling him. It was remembering him. As if the thing below had known Marcus long before he was ever born, and now that he had spoken the forbidden question, what sleeps beneath? It had permission to say his name again. Not Marcus, but the first name, the name of the wound. He stood at the edge of the pit, unable to see its bottom. The walls around him pulsed with lightless veins, twitching like muscle. Warm air rose from below, not like breath, but like exhaled memory. Every beat of it brought a new hallucination. His mother crying behind a closed door, Lena whispering across a hospital bed, Eleanor bleeding ink from her eyes, the church pews full of empty faces, turning slowly toward him, always with the same expression. You opened it. He couldn't move. Not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't beneath Vitara. This was Vitara. Or, rather, this was the part of her she had tried to forget. The place even she would not look. The womb of the wound. He heard scratching behind him. Turned. A figure crawled from the shadows, broken fingers, hair slicked with earth. Its face a child's, a boy. Marcus blinked. The boy was him, age 9, covered in mud, eyes wide with something too big for a child to carry. The boy looked up and said, "You left me here." Marcus whispered, "No, that's not true." You forgot me, the boy said, voice splitting down the middle. When you moved on. When you said, I'm fine now. That's when I sank. That's when I fed her. The walls pulsed again, loud. A heartbeat, not Marcus's, not Vitara's, but the boy's. He stepped back, shaking. I couldn't hold on. I had to let it go. No, the boy said. You let it grow. And behind him, the pit began to breathe. A single sound rose from its center. A dragging chain, then another, and then fingers. Thin, gray fingers the size of spears, reaching up the sides of the pit, scratching grooves into the stone as they climbed. Marcus ran, but there was nowhere to go. The walls closed in, forming a hallway, a door at the far end. He threw himself toward it, shoved it open, and stumbled, back into Ashthorn. Only it wasn't his Ashthorn. This version was perfect, pristine. Every house freshly painted, every street quiet, the sky a flawless blue without clouds. Children laughing, birds singing, music drifting faintly from a record player inside a distant house. And there, standing in the street, was Lena, alive, smiling. Marcus's heart nearly collapsed. She walked toward him, arms open. There you are, she said. You've been gone so long. He reached for her. Lena, is it really you? She nodded. Of course. Don't you remember? You fixed it. You closed the door. Everything's okay now. But he couldn't feel her touch. Her hand passed through his, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. Come back, she whispered. Stay with me. This time we can forget together. He backed away. You're not her. But I'm what you want her to be, she said. Her voice began to splinter. Isn't that better than nothing? The sky above them flickered. A glitch in the illusion. He saw it now, the seams, the edges. This wasn't a memory. It was a trap made from memory. Vitara wasn't just feeding on grief anymore. She was offering comfort, offering peace. The lie that if he surrendered, he could live inside a soft, quiet version of his past forever. Lena stepped closer. Her skin twitched, her voice slipping deeper into static. You loved me, she said. You built me. I am the only version that ever loved you back. Marcus clenched his fists. You're not her. You're just a room wearing her face. The sky split. The town trembled, and Lena's smile turned monstrous. She opened her mouth wide, wider, until it cracked her jaw, until it reached her chest, and from inside came the voice. Not hers, not Marcus's. Vitara, you opened the wound. Now you must be the seal. Marcus turned and ran. The streets melted behind him. Houses collapsed into puddles of glass and bone. Trees burst into ash, the sky blood. And far ahead, a single structure remained untouched, the church. He threw himself through its doors. Inside silence, no pews, no altar, just a staircase leading down. He took it and kept going, down. Past where sound could follow, past where time had meaning, down into the oldest part of the hollow, until finally he came to the door. It wasn't like the others. This one wasn't wood, it was skin, stretched, beating, veined, and written across it, in blood not yet dry, this is where it ends. Marcus reached out. The door pulsed. Behind it, something stirred. Not Vitara, older, the thing she feared, the first voice. And it knew he was coming. The door breathed. Marcus didn't know how long he'd been standing there, hand trembling inches from the skin, like surface. It rose and fell in shallow inhales, as if sleeping, or pretending to. The blood-lettered message across it, this is where it ends, had begun to fade. The letters absorbing back into the tissue like the door itself was ashamed of its own honesty. It didn't want to be read. It didn't want to be seen. He stepped closer, and the texture of the door changed. Not visibly, not in any way the eye could track, but the moment his fingertips brushed it, the surface rippled with recognition, like it knew him, like it remembered his childhood bruises, the bone he broke at 10, the lie he told Lena that made her cry. This door didn't guard a place. It guarded everything he had buried. A whisper escaped from its seam. Not from the other side, from the door itself. You were the first. Marcus staggered back. No, I wasn't. You asked first. You opened first. You looked when no one else would. The voice wasn't female or male. It wasn't spoken. It rose in his blood, echoing across bones he didn't know held memory. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head as waves of thought not his own cascaded down. But they didn't come in language. They came in moments. An ancient hand brushing the first stone of ashthorn into place, a tree being carved with a symbol older than the town, a girl's face twisting as she swallowed a name not meant for human mouths. He screamed, but no sound came. The chamber was too deep, too far from air or sky or reason. The door shivered again, and then it opened. No hinges, no latches, no click, just a peeling like skin separating from skin. What lay beyond was not light, not dark, not even shadow. It was before those things. Before time had decided what was visible and what was hidden. Marcus stood slowly, bracing against the wall, and stepped through. He expected horror. He expected the screams of the damned, or a cavern of endless teeth, or a creature too vast to comprehend. He was ready for that, but what he found was worse. A room, ordinary, square, faint yellow light flickering from an unseen source, and in the center, a table, and at the table, himself. Not another doppelganger, not a mirrored echo, but him, older, gray at the temples, skin thinner, eyes exhausted, sitting calmly, drinking something dark from a glass. Marcus blinked. What is this? The older version looked up. The root, Vitara. No. A pause. She's just the first story that survived the truth. This is the truth. Marcus stepped closer. Then what is she? The older version set the glass down. The sound was sharp, final. She's the echo of this room. The scream we made when we saw it. The scar left behind after the first time we remembered what we are. A chill passed through Marcus. What we are. You think the hollow was under Ashthorn, the man said, standing now. You think it was a place. It was never under the ground. It was always under us, carried in the blood. Passed through generations like a curse disguised as grief, a wound pretending to be love. That's why she always came back, because we kept her alive. No, Marcus whispered. The older man stepped forward. There was no Lena, not really. She was one of the doors, and so were we. Every time someone remembered her too hard, loved her too long, refused to let her go, she walked again. Not as a ghost, not as a demon, as a mirror, reflecting everything we couldn't bury. Marcus backed away. I don't believe you. The man reached into his chest without breaking skin and pulled out something glowing. It pulsed, red and white, flickering with tiny faces. He held it out. You don't have to believe. You already know. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. Because once you ask the name of the thing beneath, you become its mouth. Marcus stared at the object. A heart. But not a human one. It was shaped like a house. A small house. White, with the door still open. And inside it, something watched. Take it, the older version said. Marcus shook his head. I didn't come this far to become her. She's already inside you, he said. But this is what she fears. The only thing she can't eat. The only thing older than her. What is it? The older man smiled. Forgiveness. Marcus froze. What? She was born from grief, fed by it, worshipped through it. But this, he held up the glowing heart again. This is what unbuilds her. Not fire, not forgetting, forgiving yourself. Her, them. All of it. The room shook. The skin door behind him sealed shut. The walls bled light. And from every crack, Vitara began to scream. Not in rage, in fear. You'll lose her, she howled. You'll lose everything. You'll be empty again. Marcus stepped forward and touched the glowing heart. And the moment his fingers brushed it, he remembered the night she died, not as trauma, not as punishment, but simply as truth. He remembered the way she smiled at him when he was 5. He remembered her hair in the wind, the silence after she was gone, the years he never forgave himself, the prayers he never said, the knife of guilt he kept twisting, and then he let go, not of her, of the pain, and the room exploded in silence, not destruction, Release. The walls uncoiled. The light receded. And Vitara's voice, so vast, so constant, stopped, not faded, stopped. Like a breath held too long, like a scream without an ending. And Marcus was alone, alone with the heart in his hands, alone in the truth. The silence was the first thing he noticed. Not a peaceful kind, not the soft hush of a calm morning. This silence was weight, a crushing absence, no birds, no wind, no movement. Even his own breath felt muffled, as if the world around him were wrapped in thick, invisible fabric. Marcus stood still at the edge of the path, heart still trembling from the unmaking he had witnessed, the glowing heart still echoing faintly within his chest. His skin was dry, his clothes no longer damp with sweat or fear. But something was wrong, something fundamental. Ashthorn lay ahead, but it wasn't the same. From where he stood, a high hill that should not exist, he saw the entire town below, streets in perfect symmetry, houses arranged like teeth in a jaw, all white, all clean, all identical. There were no trees, no graves, no shadows, only right angles, perfect order. Marcus took a step forward, and the ground didn't crunch underfoot. It clicked, like tile. Too smooth, too exact. He looked down. The soil was gone, replaced with something synthetic. Not metal, not stone. Something imitating familiarity. He walked. The town was silent as he entered. Each house had the same porch, the same windows, the same mailbox with no name. Curtains were drawn, but Marcus felt eyes watching. Dozens, hundreds. And yet not a single window twitched. No breath of life stirred. He passed what should have been the grocery store, but it was a facade now, just a front wall, painted windows, and nothing behind it but flat space. A town of memories restructured into shells. At the center of town square, the fountain had returned. But the water flowed upward, curling in a spiral into the sky, never spilling. Above it hung something that looked like a chandelier, but it was made of limbs. Pale arms, dozens of them, stretching outward like a blossoming flower. And in the center a mask, white, porcelain, smiling. Marcus recognized it, Vitara's last expression. It stared down from the sky like a monument to everything he'd destroyed, or thought he had. He turned in a slow circle. Not a soul in sight, and yet he wasn't alone. A mirror shimmered across the surface of the fountain's reverse spiral, not reflecting him, reflecting her, Lena. Again, her face was younger than he remembered, lit from within by something he couldn't place. Not rage, not sorrow. Something worse, hope. "Marcus," she said, voice flat. "You've come back." He swallowed. "You're not her. I'm what you carried," the reflection replied. "And I'm what was left when you dropped me." The image warped. Her skin began to ripple, fold, stretch. Behind her eyes, rooms opened, entire hallways where different versions of her paced like prisoners. "You broke the heart," she said, "but you didn't close the wound." The wind picked up, except there wasn't any wind. There was no weather at all, only change. Behind him, the houses began to shift, windows blinking open, doors twisting, mailboxes growing mouths. The town was alive, more alive than ever. Marcus turned to run, but every direction led back to the square. Every path was the same. He was trapped. The reflection of Lena moved with him. "You were never meant to escape," she said. "You were meant to replace." He stopped. Replace what? The story. That one word cracked the air, and the buildings all around him breathed in unison. Marcus staggered back. No, but it was already happening. The sidewalks buckled. Street lamps folded inward. The fountain collapsed into liquid teeth. And beneath the entire town, a sound rose. Not a scream, but a question. Who am I now? He dropped to his knees. The heart inside his chest beat faster, trying to keep him tethered. But his memories were unraveling, not lost, but rewritten. In one version of himself, he never met Lena. In another, he was Lena. In another still, he was the town. Marcus clutched his skull. The truth hit him all at once. Vitara hadn't died. She had changed. She had shed her skin and become something else. Not grief, not horror. Continuity. A force that didn't want to be feared. It wanted to be retold, rebranded, repurposed, reissued. And Marcus, the one who survived, was now the author. That was the price. To kill the god of memory, he had to replace her function. And the only way to keep her dead was to keep telling the story. Again and again and again, until it consumed everything. He screamed, not in fear, but in protest. But even that was scripted. He saw it in the reflection before he made the sound. The town was his now, and he had never left. Marcus stood in the square, every breath louder than the silence around him. The buildings had frozen mid-shift, mouths and windows half open, like they were waiting for him to speak again, waiting for him to continue the narrative. The twisted fountain now lay flat, a circle of still black water, reflecting a sky that pulsed between storm gray and sterile white. Everything was listening. Everything was expectant. He could feel it. The town had no more will of its own. It had no center anymore. It was being fed by him, sustained by his movement, his memory, his refusal to forget. And now, every step he took gave it shape. Every word he thought filled another house. He backed away from the fountain. "No," he muttered. "I'm done. I'm not your voice. I'm not your vessel." But the ground beneath his feet responded instantly, tiles shifting, reforming into the shape of letters. Marcusspeks. The moment the phrase completed, a child's laughter echoed from the nearest house. One of the doors opened, revealing a boy, a younger Marcus, standing in perfect stillness, mouth slack, eyes dead. The boy raised a hand in greeting. Marcus recoiled. The boy mimicked him. Even in stillness, he copied. Not because he was real, but because he was written. And Marcus was the one doing the writing. He spun around. More doors opened. More versions of himself. Different ages. Different wounds. One holding a bloody brick. Another clutching Lena's old locket. A third staring blankly with stitched lips, tears pouring from sealed eyes. They were possibilities. Drafts. The town had turned into a library of Marcus Daniels. A catalog of what he could have been, what he almost was, what Vitara might have made of him if she'd lingered just a little longer. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Stop this." But the town didn't listen, because it wasn't a town anymore. It was a narrative machine, and it had only one command now: continue. He turned to the church, still standing, still untouched by the deformities of the rest of the town. It looked almost clean, inviting, but something inside him resisted it. He remembered what it had once held: the chair, the script, the sermon that spoke itself. But if the square had turned into his stage, maybe the church was the control room. He ran toward it. With every step, the town groaned, not in pain, but in warning. The houses leaned inward, their walls trying to stretch toward him. Arms made from gutters and shingles clawing at the empty air. Street lamps cracked like bone, their light flickering into strange symbols that tried to write themselves across his skin. The church doors opened before he touched them. That worried him most. He stepped inside, and everything fell silent again. No echoes, no breath, just a thick, humming quiet, like standing inside a lung that had forgotten how to inhale. Inside, the church was hollow, a vast space filled only by one thing: a desk. Wooden, old, familiar, the desk from his childhood bedroom, and on it, a typewriter, not vintage, not rusted, brand new, keys untouched. The paper rolled into it blank, except for the first line. Already typed. Marcus stood in the church, staring at the machine he never wanted. His hands shook. No. But the next line typed itself, key by key, slow and deliberate. He said no, but his fingers itched to type, because not writing would mean forgetting, and forgetting would mean losing her all over again. Marcus backed away. "I won't do this. I destroyed her. I buried her. I let her go." The typewriter responded, "You didn't bury her. You replaced her. And now you must be remembered." The windows shattered. The air thickened. And the walls of the church began to twist inward, reshaping into book spines. Hundreds of volumes, all with the same title: The Hollow of Marcus Daniels. His scream echoed, raw and desperate. He ran for the door. It was gone. Only blank wall where it used to be. The church was no longer an exit. It was a cover. And Marcus was now chapter 1. He turned back to the typewriter, trembling. The keys began to move again, not by ghostly hand, by memory, his memory. Moments he'd forgotten returning in perfect clarity. The way Lena looked at him the last time they spoke, the smell of ash in her hair, the way her voice cracked when she said, "Don't turn around." It all began to right itself. His legs gave out beneath him. He crawled toward the machine, not to stop it, but to see if he still had the strength to tear the paper from the spool. He reached up, and the machine stopped. Dead silence. He looked, the page was gone, and in its place, a mirror, again, but this time no reflection, just the dark, and in that dark, a voice. "Tell it wrong, Marcus." "And I'll tell it right." He stood. The machine sparked once, and then the room began to shake. Not collapse, erase. The church didn't fall, it vanished. The windows turned into birds and flew away. The floor melted into pages, and Marcus found himself falling. Through layers of himself. Through every moment he thought was his own. All the way down. Until he landed in a room made of typewriters. All of them clacking. All of them writing. All of them writing him. But only one had his voice. And if he didn't find it, someone else would write the ending. The typewriters were endless, stretching into the black like stars made of ink and iron. Each one clacked and rattled on its own accord. Thousands of them, maybe more. The sound wasn't noise. It was language given shape, a mechanical chant that pulsed in rhythm with something Marcus couldn't see, but felt pressing against his ribcage like a second heartbeat trying to force its way in. He stood slowly, knees aching from the fall. Though he couldn't remember landing, he couldn't even remember jumping. He had simply been here, and the moment that realization sank in, one of the typewriters closest to him stopped. He turned. Its page read. Marcus stood slowly, knees aching from the fall. His stomach turned. He backed away, and as he did, another machine paused, its keys still halfway depressed. He approached cautiously, his shadow warping across the floor, not because of light, but because of attention. This one read. Marcus approached cautiously, unaware that this machine had already written his end. He staggered back, heart racing. No. No. That's not how this works. But the moment the words left his mouth, a third machine typed. He denied the rules, but the ink had already dried. Marcus looked up. The void was not empty. The ceiling shimmered, if you could call it that. Not sky, not space, something between thoughts. Words swam through it like fish beneath ice, entire sentences flickering in and out of existence. Some looked familiar, things he'd said. Others were possibilities. Moments never lived but almost chosen. He realized slowly that this wasn't just a place. It was a drafting table for reality, and someone was sitting at the head of it. He saw her. Vitara, or something wearing her shape. She sat at a desk made of mirrors, her fingers dipped in ink so dark it shimmered purple. Around her, the typewriters fell silent. One by one, they ceased their clatter until only the ticking of an unseen clock remained. Her face was calmer now, no longer twisted, no longer feral, beautiful, even, but blank, like she hadn't chosen a personality yet, like she was still waiting for the script. "You gave me your story," she said, "and stories demand continuation." "I destroyed your heart," Marcus replied. "You're dead." "Was I?" Her eyes glowed faintly. "Or did I simply reformat?" She stood. Her body shimmered at the edges, flickering between identities. Lena, Eleanor, Marcus's mother, then back again. You removed the grief. But the memory remained, and memory is structure. You cannot destroy structure without replacing it. "I don't want to replace anything," Marcus said. "That doesn't matter anymore," she whispered, stepping toward him. "You're no longer the character. You're the author. You have to choose how it ends. Because if you don't," she gestured around them, "these machines will choose for you." He looked around again. Some of the typewriters had begun to twitch, rebooting, and the pages they were producing were wrong. Fractured versions. In one, he was a murderer. In another, a priest. In another, he died before ever reaching Ashthorn. Each machine wasn't just writing possibilities. They were publishing them. Every variation becoming real somewhere. Every lie becoming law. Marcus clenched his fists. Then I'll write my own ending. Vitara smiled. Then come take it. A single typewriter at the center of the room lit up. It sat on a pedestal, surrounded by the bones of failed authors. Skeletons draped in robes made of manuscript paper, their fingers still reaching toward the final keys. Marcus stepped forward. The floor pulsed beneath his boots, like walking on the backs of forgotten names. The typewriter before him gleamed with blood-polished metal. Its keys were blank, its ribbon wet, and the page was bare. Except for one sentence, this is the moment he chose. He reached for the keys. And instantly, every typewriter in the void screamed. A sound of grinding metal and tearing paper. The voice of a million narratives trying to overwrite him, to shove their endings into his mouth. He felt Lena's voice whispering one version. You never saved me. His mother sobbing. You were never enough. Eleanor laughing. You thought this was about you. He pushed forward, fingers trembling, and typed the first line. He chose silence. The void shook. Vitara's smile faltered. Because in a place where everything depended on story, on noise, on detail, on recollection, choosing silence was a corruption, a void within a void, a choice outside the bounds of what could be predicted. She screamed. The machines buckled. Pages flew into the dark. The mirror beneath her cracked. Marcus kept typing. He refused the arc. He refused the grief. He let it be quiet. Let it be still. Let the story end. The machines went dark, one by one, until only his remained. Then, nothing, no sound, no flickering, no breath. And he was alone again, truly alone, not as punishment, but as freedom, or so he thought, until behind him, a new page rolled into the typewriter, and in wet, black ink, a line typed itself, without his hands, but endings are only endings when someone refuses to turn the page. The sentence hung in the air, suspended like a spider's thread catching light in a dead room. Marcus stared at it, his fingers hovering over the keys that no longer responded to his touch. The machine was warm, humming. Not from power, but from presence, as if something on the other side had placed its hand against the typewriter and pressed gently, waiting to be let in. But endings are only endings when someone refuses to turn the page. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He barely breathed. And still, the page began to scroll, not manually, not by mechanism. It unfolded, as if it were alive, peeling back layers of itself like skin. The words didn't type one by one anymore. They bled in, soaking through the paper from some unseen well of ink. Marcus stood before the final truth, having mistaken stillness for silence, and silence for peace. The typewriter wasn't a tool. It was a mouth. A mouth for the thing Marcus had tried to deny. Not Vitara. She had been a symptom. A veil. What lived beneath her was older than memory, older than story. It wasn't grief. It was expectation. And it had been starving ever since he broke the pattern. The air shifted. No, it tightened. The void around him began to shudder, not like a world collapsing, but like a stage being reassembled for a different act. Curtains drawn back. Spotlights flickering to life. The typewriters around him, once quiet, now began to weep ink. The pages they had produced curled and blackened, their text vanishing. All except for one machine, his. It kept writing. He believed he could end the story. But the story was not his. It was never his. He was only the echo of a voice that never belonged to him. Marcus tried to speak, but no sound came out. His throat felt packed with cotton soaked in syrup. His tongue refused to lift. He turned, stumbling away from the machine. But the void didn't allow direction anymore. Every step became a circle. Every thought warped and came back inverted. He blinked and found himself in a living room. Bright, Familiar. Lena's old apartment. It smelled like lavender and burnt coffee. The couch was sunken on the left side, just like it had been. Her books lined the shelves. The painting above the mantel. The one she bought at the flea market because it looked haunted. Hung crooked, just as he remembered. But Lena wasn't there. Someone else was. Him. Another Marcus. This version sat in a chair, his back straight, hands folded, face calm. He looked up, but his eyes were wrong. Too large. Too flat. Like something had hollowed out the human in him and painted over the vacancy. "Hello," the other Marcus said. "Where am I?" Marcus whispered. "In the version you never escaped," the double said. "The one where you stayed with her. The one you never stopped writing." "I didn't write this." "But you did," the double said, standing. "Every time you refused to move on. Every time you ran your thumb over her photograph. Every night you dreamed of what might have been. You carved this room into your mind like a cathedral. And now that you've tried to burn the pages, the altar is bleeding. The walls groaned. Shadows lengthened across the ceiling, forming symbols that twitched like insects pinned to cork. Marcus looked away, but the floor had changed too. No longer carpet, but pages. Thousands of them, all printed with his thoughts. Things he'd never said out loud. Guilty things. Secret things. The other Marcus stepped closer. "Do you understand now? You can't erase the story by silencing the voice. Because the voice is everyone who remembers you. Everyone you ever hurt. Everyone you ever loved." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, and Marcus felt himself. Not a stranger's hand. Not a clone's. It was his hand. Grieving for itself. Begging to be let back in. "You tried to close the wound," the voice whispered, now inside him. "But you never cleaned it. You buried the rot." And then came the noise. A low, thunderous sound from beneath the floor. Not footsteps. Typing. The typewriters had found him again. Only now, they were writing new chapters. Replacements. Redrafts. And the next one was almost done. The other Marcus stepped back, eyes now completely black, smile spreading too wide. "Do you want to see what you become when the story decides you failed?" Marcus turned. The door was open. The room beyond led not to a hallway, but to another version of himself. This one older, bones twisted, fingers elongated into quills that blot ink. He wrote on the walls, wrote with desperation, with hunger, and every word he carved summoned more rooms, more versions, more narrative possibilities. He was no longer a man, he was structure. And the last Marcus, the one who had resisted it all, was just another frame in a long hallway of selves who thought they could change the ending. He stumbled back, breath shallow, the room spinning, and then he screamed. But this time not in fear, in defiance. No more. The walls cracked. The paper beneath his feet caught flame, not red, not orange, but white blue, and from that fire nothing emerged. Not a shape, not a god, just absence. Pure, silent, unstructured absence, and for the first time the story stuttered. The scream lingered, but not in sound. It lingered in the walls, in the very concept of place. The room, the one posing as Lena's apartment, cracked around Marcus like porcelain under heat. No shards fell, no dust lifted, the world simply peeled. Behind it blankness, not white, not dark, not neutral. This wasn't the absence of color or the death of light. This was pre-creation. A space before thought. A place where time hadn't yet learned how to count. Marcus stood at its edge, barefoot on paper that had stopped burning and now turned to soft ash. It didn't move with the wind, because there was no wind. It floated without purpose, circling him like ghosts that had forgotten how to haunt. Behind him, the apartment was gone. The other Marcuses were gone. Even Vitara, if she had ever been more than the story's voice, had vanished like smoke through a locked window. He had undone the shape, and now he stood in the breach. It didn't welcome him. It didn't reject him. It simply was, and that was worse. Because without rules, anything could happen. Or nothing. He took a step forward, barefoot on concept. The floor wasn't solid, yet it held him. The distance ahead bent as he walked, stretching when he wanted to arrive, shrinking when he doubted. He knew, instinctively, that there were no paths here, only decisions pretending to be places. And then a voice returned. But not Vitara's. His own. "This is where you started, Marcus." He spun, but there was no one. Only echoes. Before Lena. Before the church. Before the town. Before you needed a reason to suffer. The voice came from within. Not from his mouth, but from the parts of his memory he never trusted. The guilt, slick corners, the dreams he'd woken from weeping, unable to explain why. "You're not me," he muttered. "I'm the part you left behind the first time you opened the book." He stopped walking. What book? And then it appeared. Not in front of him. Not behind. It wasn't placed. It simply was now here. A book, bound in skin that shimmered with tiny pores, rising and falling like breath. No title on the cover. Just a symbol. 3 interlocking circles, one burned, one cracked, one dripping. The moment he reached for it, his fingernails turned black. Not rot. Ink. The closer he got, the more his hands forgot what they were for. Muscles pulling the wrong way. Knuckles stiffening. Fingers aching to curl around a pen, even as he begged them to stop. The book opened itself. Pages turned, each one blank until he blinked. Then full. Until he blinked again. Then blank once more. It was showing him what he could write, and what he must never write, all at once. A riddle with no question, a trap with no bait, and on the very last page, a name, not his, not Lena's, but something older. A name shaped like a scar on language. He couldn't say it, couldn't even think it. The moment he tried, his teeth ached, his gums bled, and his jaw clenched like a vise. But he knew what it was. It was the first story, the original lie, the one Vitara had tried to perfect, the one Ashthorn was built upon, the one Marcus had now accidentally freed. And now, the void began to shift, not move, not breathe. Hunger. The breach was waking. The space between narratives was alive, and it had tasted author's blood. He turned to run. But the moment he did, the breach folded in on itself, and he was no longer running forward. He was running into the next page. The scene snapped into place. Cold, sharp air, metal walls. He was in a hospital corridor. But not just any hospital. The one where Lena died. Only now it wasn't memory. It was fresh. The hallway smelled of iodine and unspoken apologies. The floor was too clean. The overhead lights buzzed like distant screams translated into electricity. Marcus walked, feet echoing, echoing, echoing. He passed rooms he didn't recognize, names he didn't know. Every door he passed had one word stamped on it, EDIT. He reached the end of the hall. Lena's room. No number. Just a door slightly ajar, warm light flickering from inside. And beside it a clipboard. He lifted it. There was no chart, only a note. Rewrite carefully. She remembers every version. He dropped the clipboard. Something inside moved. Not just a body, a presence. A choice. He pushed open the door. Inside, Lena sat upright in bed, smiling gently. Alive, unbruised, unburdened. "Hi," she said. Marcus stepped inside, legs shaking. She looked exactly like she did that morning. That last morning. Not the one where she died. The one before, the one where they argued. And she'd told him he always disappeared when she needed him. This wasn't a replay. It was a re-offer. The story was giving him a chance to change the shape, to write it better, to bury the wound with flowers instead of fire. But at what cost? He looked to the corner of the room. A shadow stood there. No face, no eyes, just a voice. "If you keep her, you forget the truth." Marcus turned back to Lena. She held out her hand. "Just stay this time." He stepped forward. The breach pulsed. And the story waited. Marcus didn't move. Lena's hand hung in the space between them, still and warm and impossibly real. Her eyes, those same tired, laughing, almost crying eyes, were waiting for him to blink. But he couldn't, because blinking meant believing, and believing meant surrender. Behind her, the room swayed faintly, like it had been pulled from memory too fast. The corners were a little too soft. The shadows didn't match the lighting. Everything had the hue of nostalgia, glowing at the edges, but hollow at the center. Still, she looked perfect. Better than perfect. Lena had never looked this whole. No exhaustion behind her smile. No tension in her voice. The years of silence and heartbreak and loss stripped away. As if those things had never happened. As if Marcus had never caused them. "You don't have to keep digging," she said softly. "You don't have to keep hurting. Just sit. We can start from here." Marcus stepped back instead, and the room shifted, responding to his resistance. The corners sharpened. The ceiling began to hum. The glow dimmed, replaced by a pulsing uncertainty. "You're not her," he whispered, even though part of him wanted her to argue. Lena's smile didn't falter. "No, I'm not the version you buried. I'm the one you forgot." He shook his head. You never let yourself remember the good," she said. "You built your grief around the worst day. You turned my death into a cathedral, and every time you walked back into it, you gave it more bricks." Her voice cracked then. "Just slightly. Enough to feel real. Enough to hurt. You stopped writing about who I was," she continued, "and only wrote what losing me made of you." A long silence. "Then, you made me a ghost so you wouldn't have to be one." Marcus closed his eyes. It was true. He had immortalized her not in love, but in loss. Preserved her like an exhibit in a museum he forced himself to visit daily. Not to mourn, but to justify who he'd become. Lena stood, her hospital gown vanishing in a blink. Now she wore her favorite sweater. The one with the coffee stain. The one he always teased her about. "I don't blame you," she said. "But you're not here to rewrite me. You're here to bury me properly." And suddenly the room groaned. Not physically, narratively. The world began to tear at the edges, like a badly folded script. Pages curling back to reveal black ink beneath white paint. The false layer peeled, and the breach Marcus thought he'd escaped came rushing in again, sliding over Lena's room like water finding its level. He turned in time to see the door swallowed by dark. Lena didn't panic. She just looked at him and said, "If you leave now, I won't be waiting next time." Marcus nodded and stepped into the breach. But it was no longer a breach. It had shape now. Form. A hallway, narrow, endless, lined on either side with mirrors. But these weren't reflecting him. They were playing versions of him. Each mirror showed a different outcome, a different life. In one, he'd never left Ashthorne. In another, he'd never met Lena. In one, she lived. In another, he did not. He walked, and the mirrors whispered. Some begged him to stop. Others pleaded for attention. Most just replayed, until he came to one that showed nothing at all. Just a flat, dark glass. No reflection. No past, no future. He touched it, it cracked. And beyond the crack, a single white light. He pressed harder. The mirror shattered. And through it, Marcus stepped into a room that wasn't a room at all. It was the origin. There were no walls, no sky, only a pulse. A rhythm older than language. The same beat he had heard in Vitara's domain. But this one was different. Slower, hungrier. And then, he saw it. Not a god, not a demon, not even a being. Just a shape, a wound in space, curled like a sleeping child made of pages. Ink stained, paper thin. Wrapped in chains of text that pulsed with forgotten names. This was the first story. The true hollow. The nameless source from which Vitara had once crawled. The same place Marcus had unknowingly opened when he asked what sleeps beneath. It stirred now, recognizing him. Recognizing that its next iteration had arrived. A voice, unlike any he had heard, formed in his mind. Not spoken, not written. Offered. Say the first line. Make me real again. Marcus stood still, heart in his throat, hands trembling, because he knew if he spoke that line, everything would begin again. The church, the grief, the rewrites, the false Len, no, all of them would return. He would become the caretaker of the wound, the next Vitara. The only way to contain the hollow, was to become its new narrator. He turned around, but there was no way back. Just blankness, silence. The wound pulsed again. Say it, and in the distance the typewriters began to stir. The story was getting impatient. The hollow waited, not with urgency, not with malice, just with certainty. The way the tide waits for the moon to make its pull, it had no face, no form to fear. And that was what made it unbearable. There was nothing to scream at, nothing to blame. Only the shape of a void, curled like a slumbering thought, wrapped in chains of half-finished sentences. Marcus stood still, though his bones ached from holding back the words pressing against his throat. The urge to speak, to start, was not his. It had been planted in him the moment he crossed the border into Ashthorn. Every choice, every nightmare, every echo of Lena or Eleanor, or the versions of himself, had been another line in a script he never agreed to write, yet now held in full. And now it asked for the only thing he had left, the first line. One sentence to begin the wound again. Just one. The hollow pulsed, and with it, the white room darkened at the edges. Not from shadows, but from narrative pressure. 1,000 typewriters waiting with curled tongues and spooled ribbon, aching for ink. Ready to start again. He whispered, "What happens if I don't?" The room answered by forgetting. Not erasing. Forgetting. The air around him turned thin, the colors began to desaturate, his hands lost their scars. His name started to slip from his thoughts like smoke through a sieve. The hollow had no need to punish, only to remove, to delete, because silence, in this place, wasn't defiance, it was permission, the kind that unmade, and yet, he didn't speak. He knelt, watching the pulsing mass, the words breathing beneath its skin, the hints of stories clawing to be born. And he felt them, not with his mind, but with something deeper, the weight of potential, the monstrous responsibility of beginning again. Lena was in there, somewhere. And not just her. All of them. Everyone he'd ever known. Every moment he had clung to, folded and stored inside this swelling, ancient wound. Waiting to be written again, to be rewritten, to be trapped again. "I see it now," he muttered, voice cracking. The hollow rippled in response. "I see what you are. You are not memory. You are not story. You are repetition. You are the lie of preservation. The idea that by telling something again and again, it will mean more, rather than rot from the inside. And I am the liar who fed you." He stood, and something shifted, not in the room, in him. For the first time since crossing into Ashthorn, he felt the weight lift, not entirely, not cleanly, but enough to stand without his spine bowed. The hollow pulsed again. An invitation. "Say it," it whispered, though it had no voice. "Say the first line." But Marcus didn't. He took a step forward instead. The space between him and the hollow rippled. Each footfall rewrote something beneath him. A memory of Lena's laugh. The way Eleanor had twisted her ankle once in the woods, the shape of his father's silhouette in the kitchen doorway. With every step, he walked over what he would lose, and still he walked, until he stood within reach of the wound. It moved. Its form reshaped, cracking like ice underfoot. A soft breath of warm air hit his chest, and he nearly gagged. It smelled like parchment and dried blood, like the pages of an old book pulled from a flooded basement, like grief rewritten until it no longer resembled truth. "You want a first line?" Marcus asked. The typewriters in the void beyond stirred. He placed a hand on the hollow, felt the pulse, felt the begging, and then he said it. "This story does not begin." The room screamed. The typewriters tore their own ribbons. Ink bled from the walls, seeping down into non-space. The air turned inside out. Gravity reversed. Reality twisted not into chaos, but into cancellation. The hollow spasmed. And for the first time, it made a sound. A child's cry. Not in pain. In confusion. Because something had been started, and then instantly denied its own birth. The feedback loop shattered. The mirrors cracked. The endless versions of Marcus that had haunted the story fractured. Each one wailing as their scripts caught fire. Lena's voice flickered across the sky like lightning. "You found me once. Then, don't find me again." The hollow split, not like flesh, like paper, ripped from the center. Inside it was not a heart, not a soul, just a typewriter, burning, its final page still half written. And Marcus watched it curl, blacken, turn to dust, then silence. Real silence, no metaphors, no waiting presence, no breath behind the curtain, just absence. Clean, terrifying, pure absence. He sat down in the nothing, not to mourn, not to rest, to be still, truly still. And the story, at last, stopped telling itself. Marcus opened his eyes to rain. Real rain. Cold, spitting, indifferent droplets that tapped against his cheeks like fingers checking for breath. He was lying in a patch of grass behind a rusted road sign, the metal flaking with red. Aish Tishauaran, it read, the lettering worn to the bone. The sky above was a thick slate, clouds hanging low and fat with grief. No pulsing light, no hum, no symbols burned into the clouds, just rain and gray and silence. He sat up. His bones ached, not from the weight of story, but from actual cold. His clothes were damp, mud clung to his knees. For the first time in what felt like years, Marcus was tangible. No more loops, no echoes, no rooms built from metaphors or moons pretending to be places. He touched his own chest, still breathing, still here, but something felt off, wrong in a way that wasn't supernatural. Something human, something terrifying in its simplicity. He stood and staggered toward the road. The town hadn't changed much. The buildings were still cracked, the streets still warped by neglect. But the color had returned. The strange shimmer that had hung over everything like a greasy film was gone. No more shifting bricks or whispering gutters. No flickering lights trying to become words. The town was normal and completely unfamiliar. He passed the general store, empty. The diner, closed. Windows dark. The church still stood at the far end of the street, but its steeple no longer leaned, no longer bled black lines from its edges. Just a tired, white cross staring into a dull sky. There were people, though. A woman walked a dog near the square. A man washed his car in the rain, whistling something tuneless. Children played outside a run-down house, their laughter sharp and clear. But none of them looked at him. Not once. Marcus approached a man loading groceries into the back of a truck. "Excuse me," he said. "Can I ask you something?" The man didn't flinch, didn't pause, didn't even see him. He repeated it louder. Still nothing. It was as if Marcus were transparent. Not invisible, just unregistered. He walked in front of a passing couple. They didn't slow, didn't swerve. They moved through him like wind through open doors. He reached out and touched the shoulder of a teenager walking by with earbuds in. His hand made contact. He felt the warmth of skin, the brush of cotton, but the boy didn't notice, didn't turn. Marcus stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. He screamed. No one heard. No one looked. The world had moved on, not from the story, but from him. He wasn't trapped in a nightmare anymore. He was trapped in normalcy, a reality scrubbed clean of his fingerprints, a town that had never known his name. He ran. Back to the square, back to where the fountain had once melted into a voice, where the bricks had whispered guilt. Now it was dry, silent, just a cracked concrete bowl filled with leaves and beer cans. He stood in the middle of the plaza spinning.
"Hello!"
He screamed. "Duas eran yon carnomum e." No response. Even the birds ignored him. He sank to his knees. This wasn't exile. This wasn't punishment. It was erasure. He had refused to speak the first line, and now no one would remember the last. There was no Lena, no Eleanor, no mirrored versions of himself. No Vitara. Not even a hollow. Just the remains of a man who had refused to play the part, left behind in a world that had written him out. He sat there for hours, maybe longer. And then, finally, something changed. A child small, maybe 5 or 6, walked across the square holding a red balloon. She glanced at him, just once, and paused. Her gaze lingered, curious, confused, but not afraid. She tilted her head. "You're not supposed to be here," she said softly. Marcus's breath caught. You see me?" She nodded, then looked down at her balloon. "You're the one who stopped it." His throat went dry. Stopped what? She let go of the balloon. It floated up, slow and lazy into the sky, and when he looked back down, she was gone. No footsteps, no trace, just the echo of a child's voice in an empty square. And a message: you are not forgotten, but you are not written either, not anymore. Marcus looked around the town again. It didn't feel cruel now, just distant. Unaware of what had once tried to grow in its heart, he had killed the story, but in doing so, he had orphaned himself. Ashthorne lived on unburdened by its own ghosts, and he was a margin note in a book that had never been published. For 3 days, Marcus wandered the town like a rumor refusing to die. He no longer tried to speak to anyone. There was no point. The townspeople passed through him, around him, without even a pause in their stride. No one stared. No one shivered. He wasn't a ghost. Ghosts make people feel things. Marcus was a blemish, a misprint in the story's second edition. But still, he stayed. Not because he hoped to be seen. That hope had dried up sometime between the second sunrise and the first evening, where he realized he didn't feel hunger anymore. Not real hunger. Not human. He stayed because of the girl. The only one who'd looked at him. The only one who'd spoken. The one who let go of the balloon like it was a message tied to silence. He didn't know where she'd gone. There were no children playing in the square now. It was as if she had never existed, just like him. But he clung to that moment like it was a handhold carved into a collapsing mountain. She'd seen him, and she'd said something important. "You're not supposed to be here." That phrase haunted him more than all the nightmares Vitara had conjured. Because it meant there was a here. There was still a border, a barrier, and somehow he was the one outside of it. But not completely. Not if she saw him, not if she spoke. On the third night, something shifted. He was sitting on the old church steps, the same ones where Lina had once sat with her coffee, legs curled beneath her, trying not to talk about her nightmares. The doors behind him were locked now. The building abandoned, but the air tasted the same, that thick, metal bitter tang of waiting. He felt it before he saw it, a flicker, a pulse, a disturbance at the edge of the square, like heat rising from cold stone. Marcus stood, eyes narrowed, and there, under the flickering streetlight, she stood, the girl, same red coat, same balloon, even though she'd let it go. And she was staring right at him. He walked across the square slowly, not wanting to spook her, not wanting her to vanish again like the ending of a dream when the alarm clock screams. When he was a few steps away, she smiled. "Your edges are getting clearer." He blinked. "What?" She shrugged. "You were all smudgy before, like bad crayon lines. Now you're darker. You mean I'm becoming real again?" She frowned. "No, just more visible." He sat on the edge of the sidewalk, suddenly feeling more tired than he had in weeks. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated. "You forgot it." Marcus looked up sharply. "No, I never knew it." She shook her head. "That's not true." The air seemed to bend slightly between them, like something too large was trying to listen in without being seen. "You're not just a man," she said. "You're a line that didn't finish. And sometimes, when that happens, the story finds a way to bleed." He stared at her. "What are you?" She laughed. "I'm just a kid. But I wasn't always. Not before." That hit him like a fist to the stomach, because that felt true. He leaned closer. "Are you from the breach?" She didn't answer. Instead, she held out a folded piece of paper. "I drew something," she said. He took it with shaking hands and unfolded it. It was a map, hand-drawn, crude, messy, but unmistakably a map of Ashthorne. Except there were no street names, only marks, X's and spirals and dots with tiny phrases scribbled beside them. Where she left, where it screamed, where you disappeared the first time. Marcus stared at the spiral near the church. "Where I started," he whispered. The girl nodded. "I can't go back there," he said, voice flat. She didn't argue. She just stood and said, "But you can go forward." Then she looked at him with those two large eyes, and for a split second, something shifted behind them. A flicker of recognition, not of who he was, but of what he had done. And then she added, "Vitara is dreaming again." His throat clenched. "I destroyed her." "You destroyed her ending," the girl said. "But some characters don't die. They just get rewritten smaller, quieter. They hide between paragraphs until someone reads them by accident." Marcus stood slowly, fists clenched. "She's still here." The girl didn't answer. She was already walking away, fading into the mist that now clung to the square like breath on glass. And when Marcus looked back down at the map, one new line had appeared, freshly drawn. A red trail leading into the woods behind Ashthorn. A place that had never been there before, but now was. Because someone had written it in. The trees didn't remember him. That was the first thing he noticed. The forest behind Ashthorn. Once a place pulsing with memory and metaphor, was now just trees, bark gray with damp, leaves heavy and slick. No whispering roots. No trails reshaping behind him. Just cold mud and silence that felt unfamiliar in a way that twisted the gut. And yet, the red trail on the map matched exactly. It began at the back of the church and curved around the long, forgotten fence line, dipping into the oldest part of the woods, where even as a boy Marcus had been warned not to go. Not because of superstition, just because it didn't lead anywhere. But now it did. With every step deeper, the stillness grew heavier. The air wasn't thick, it was weighted, like walking into a room that had been holding its breath for a century. His boots squelched in the mud, and the trees began to bend inward, branches clutching at one another above like hands trying to hide a secret. He followed the map until it simply ended. There was no X, no "you are here." Just a flat stretch of earth surrounded by black pine, and in the middle of it, a hole, not wide, not gaping, just there. A circular mouth in the earth, maybe 4 feet across, its edges too smooth to be natural. It didn't steam or breathe. It didn't whisper or moan. It simply existed, as if someone had erased a piece of the forest with a precise, merciless hand. Marcus stood at its edge, the damp wind pressing at his back like fingers trying to decide whether to push. There was a rope. Rough, frayed, old. It dangled into the dark, tied to a branch above. This wasn't part of the breach. He knew that instinctively. The breach had been something abstract, something stitched from metaphor and memory. But this was physical. Someone had dug this. Or something. He took the rope. It held his weight. As he lowered himself down, the light faded quickly. The smell of rot replaced the fresh scent of rain. Walls of soil became packed stone, then something smoother, plaster maybe. He dropped into a chamber, small, circular, lit by a single, flickering oil lantern that should have died years ago. And in the center, a desk. Old, wooden, warped from moisture. On top of it sat a typewriter. Not like the others. Not like the ancient ones back in the breach or the ones in the library that blot ink like veins. This one was new, clean, wired, plugged into a battery pack with blinking green lights, and beside it stacks of paper. Not written, being written. Marcus watched as the top sheet fed itself upward, new lines appearing stroke by stroke, typed by no visible hands. He stepped closer. The page read, "Marcus finds the hole." He lowers himself down. He sees the typewriter. He watches it type. He starts to shake. His breath catches. He realizes the next line hadn't appeared yet. He backed away from the desk. His skin was crawling. Not with fear, with recognition. This wasn't just any story. It was his, still being written, still alive. He turned toward the wall of the chamber. More pages, tacked up like trophies. All the chapters he thought he destroyed. Rewritten here, reclaimed. Only now they had new names, new faces. Lena's name was gone, replaced by Celia. Vitara was now Verideth. The church was called the Sun House, but the events were the same. Twisted, muted, different. Like someone had taken the original tale and dulled its edges. Sanded down the horror until it became digestible, sellable. Something flickered in the shadows. Marcus spun, heart in his throat. A woman stood at the far wall, half draped in hanging sheets of paper, her skin the color of candle wax. She wasn't breathing, just watching. "Who are you?" Marcus rasped. She tilted her head. "Someone new," she whispered. "Someone they can tolerate." She stepped forward, and he saw her eyes weren't eyes at all. Just holes, perfect circles, like the O's of a typewriter ribbon punched too hard. "I'm the rewrite," she said. "The cleaner version." They didn't want Vitara anymore. Too loud, too cruel, too tragic. She bled too far off the page. Marcus stepped back. "No one wants this," he muttered. "You're wrong," she smiled. "They always want something. If not truth, then performance. If not grief, then spectacle. They don't remember you, Marcus, because they don't have to. They have me now." The typewriter dinged behind him. He turned. A new line had appeared. Marcus begins to panic. His throat tightened. He tries to flee. He ran, but the chamber door was gone. The rope had vanished. Only walls now. Walls covered in pages he had once burned. The woman stepped closer. "Do you know what they asked me to do?" she whispered. "Make it easier. Make it marketable. Strip out the sorrow. Add in the horror. Replace the pain with jump scares." The paper on the walls began to flutter, and then he heard it, typing. Hundreds of typewriters, all around, not in the chamber, under it. This place wasn't a bunker, it was a printing press, a factory, a story mill.
He screamed, "You're rewriting me!"
The woman's smile widened until her face split at the corners. "No, I'm replacing you." The lights went out. Marcus woke to sunlight and birdsong. Not the sickly amber sunlight of Ashthorne's breach, or the humming fluorescent flicker of nightmare rooms. This light was soft, golden, perfect. The kind of morning glow people paint on postcards. He blinked against it, confused by the lack of tension in his limbs. His skin didn't feel damp. His mind didn't ache. He was in a bed, sheets clean, a fan rotating gently overhead, and the smell of coffee, fresh, real coffee, wafted in from somewhere just out of view. For a brief moment, he didn't move, just lay there, letting the strangeness settle into him like dust. Then it hit him. This was not real. This was the new version, the rewritten life. He sat up, fast, heart hammering. The room was simple, too simple, a crafted kind of normal, the kind of normal you only see in ad campaigns and antidepressant commercials. His clothes were folded on the chair. A flannel shirt, jeans, socks without holes. He checked the mirror. His face stared back. Same eyes, same stubble. But something was wrong. He looked rested. That terrified him more than anything. A knock came at the door. "Marcus," it was a woman's voice. Bright, musical. He didn't answer. The door opened anyway. She stepped in. Not Lena, not even close. Younger, blonde, wide eyes. Too symmetrical. She was holding a tray with toast, fruit, and a cup of coffee so perfectly poured that it barely rippled. "I figured you'd sleep in after last night," she said with a laugh. "You were pretty out of it." Marcus stood, backing into the corner. "Who are you?" She blinked, confused. "Very funny. You always do this when you're stressed." She set the tray down on the nightstand. "I'm Alina, remember. Your wife." The word landed like glass in his throat. "No," he whispered. "Marcus," she said softly, "don't start again." He looked past her, out the window. A small yard, white picket fence. Neighbors waving, his life, rebuilt from parts. Nothing original, nothing authentic, no pain, no Lena, no Ashthorne. This was the rehabilitated story. The one Vitara's replacement had promised. The one shaped by 1,000 typewriters, carved into a mold labeled relatable, yet disturbing. He was in a script. A better version. A lie. He pushed past her and ran down the hallway. Hardwood floors. Family photos on the wall, none of which he remembered posing for. Him and Alina at a lake. Him and a dog he didn't know. Him and a group of smiling friends, all of whom had the same blank, generic joy painted on their faces. He burst out the front door. Suburbia stretched before him. Rows of identical houses, identical yards, identical smiles. And at the end of the street, a bookstore. The only building that didn't match. its windows dark, its sign old, its door slightly ajar. He ran toward it, Alina shouting behind him. Neighbors frowning in slow motion. He reached the door and pushed it open. Inside, the bookstore was silent. Dust on the floor, and in the center, a table. One book, black cover, no title, just that symbol. 3 circles, one burned, one cracked, one dripping. He opened it. Page 1. Marcus wakes up in the better version. He rebels. He finds the bookstore. He opens the book. He turned the page. He reads the ending he never earned. And there it was. The last line. Typed in red. He chose the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. His hands began to burn, not with heat, with recovery. Ink flooded his fingertips. His palms split. Lines of black spiraled up his arms, letters replacing veins. His name began to return to him, not as a label, but as a wound reopened. The bookstore shook. A woman's voice filled the air. "You were supposed to stay fixed, Marcus." He turned. Vitara's replacement stood in the doorway, face too smooth. Eyes 2 circles of bleeding white. "You can't come back," she said. "You don't belong to them anymore." "I never did," he whispered. The walls cracked. Not just here, everywhere, across the town, the homes, the fences, the smiles. All of it trembling under the weight of the unsanitized version, clawing its way back. Marcus held the book in his arms. And for the first time, it felt right. He remembers, the voice behind the typewriters whispered, too many mouths speaking as one. He remembers everything. And with that, Marcus ran, out of the bookstore, through the warping street, past Alina's scream, past the stitched-in smiles, back into the woods, to the place where the hole had been. But now it was a mouth, open, waiting, and he jumped in. He fell for a long time. Not down exactly. Not in the traditional way gravity punishes you for daring to jump. This was different. Marcus wasn't plummeting. He was slipping. Through layers. Through versions. Like pages tearing themselves from a book and swallowing him whole, one after another. Each one darker than the last. When he finally landed, it wasn't with a crash. No dramatic thud. No broken bones. Just stillness. And silence. The kind that felt intentional. He opened his eyes to a world without sky. A space shaped like a cathedral, except it wasn't built of stone. It was made of words. Thousands. No. Millions. Of pages suspended in place like stained glass. Some torn. Some burned. Others still wet with ink that hadn't yet dried. They floated without touching, each vibrating faintly, as if holding in a scream. This was not a place. This was a burial site. A mausoleum of stories never finished. Characters never allowed to speak again. Endings that had been changed because they were too ugly, too weird, too sad. Marcus stood slowly, the black veins of the book still wrapped around his arms like ivy. He could feel it humming against his chest. He warm and heavy. He wasn't alone. He knew that before he even turned. They were watching. From between the floating pages, eyes. Not glowing. Not monstrous. Just human. Eyes belonging to people who had never gotten their second chapter. Children who were written out in edits. Men who were too complicated to be heroes. Women who were only allowed to suffer, never survive. Ghosts who never got justice. Villains who were never explained. And then, one voice, soft. Marcus. He turned toward it like a man crawling out of a coma. There. At the center of the Cathedral of the Forgotten, Lena. She looked exactly as she had that morning in the hospital. Tired, beautiful, worn at the edges like a page reread 1,000 times. But not broken, not ghostly. She was real, and she remembered him. He ran to her, the book nearly falling from his hands. They didn't touch. Not yet. They just stood there staring, breathing, confirming that the other was more than memory. "You were gone," she said. "They rewrote you," he said. She smiled faintly. They tried to. But someone remembered the first draft. He reached for her hand. It was warm, steady, real. And then she whispered, "You know where we are, don't you?" Marcus nodded. "The cut chapters," he said. This was the place where the narrative exiled its unwanted, the discarded, the malformed, the too hard to sell. Every time a publisher said, that ending won't work, or a showrunner said, let's simplify this arc, it ended up here. It's not just you, Lena said, guiding him past the floating debris of abandoned scenes. They took me out, yes. But I was never alone. She led him past a wall of hanging scripts, and he saw them. Dozens of versions of Lena. In one, she was laughing with a child. In another, she was bleeding out in a snow-covered street. In another, she was older, alone, writing a letter she'd never send. And behind her, other characters blinked back into existence. People Marcus had never met, but somehow knew. Because he'd felt the gap when they were removed. The cathedral hummed around them. Something in the air was waking up. They know you're here, Lena whispered. The story. The new one. It's angry. He pulled the book tighter against his chest. Good. The pages overhead began to tremble. A wind picked up, not made of air, but intention. The structure began to shiver with it. They're going to try and fix it, she said. Again. They'll overwrite this place. Collapse it. Bury us in another clean draft. Marcus looked around. Then we burn the manuscript. Lena frowned. That won't be enough. The wind sharpened. Voices now, not screams but rewrites. Lines being changed in real time. Lena never existed. Marcus chose peace. There was no breach. Vitara was a metaphor. None of this mattered. He opened the book, flipped to the first page. Then looked at Lena. You still know the truth. She nodded. Then say it. And she did. Out loud. In a voice made of years and cuts and versions denied the dignity of being remembered. This was never fiction. The cathedral roared. Pages caught fire without flame. The stories screamed back. The cut characters began to move, not like ghosts, but like soldiers stepping into the war they never got to fight. Villains took hands with heroes. Monsters whispered to children. Forgotten mothers cradled the sons who never made it past Act 1. Lena turned to Marcus. There's a version of this where we lose. He smiled. I've lived it. Then write the one where we don't. He nodded. And together they placed the black book on the ground. Marcus knelt, hands over the cover, and began to type, not on keys, but with words, from memory, from pain, from truth, not the marketable kind, the real kind. And the cathedral lit up, not with light, but with recognition. The story couldn't delete what was willingly remembered. And the first new line appeared, not on the book, but in the air. This version remembers everything the others were forced to forget. The first time the cathedral trembled, it felt almost reverent, like the structure was shivering with joy at being remembered. But by the second time, it became clear this was no celebration. This was a warning. Something above was reacting, and not gently. Marcus felt it deep in his chest, a pulse, like a migraine turned into an earthquake. He looked up through the layers of hovering pages and saw them wrinkle and curl inward, as if gripped by an invisible hand. Words bled sideways. Ink began to weep from the seams. Somewhere in the rafters of this impossible place, reality was getting rewritten again, and not on their terms. Lena stood beside him. Her fingers pressed to the floating book that hovered in front of them like a lantern. Every word they wrote now lived not just on paper, but in resistance. Each sentence punched a hole through the smoother version, tearing the glossy surface of the curated narrative to reveal the grotesque, bleeding truth beneath. But the lie was fighting back. From the far end of the cathedral, something began to form. Not walk, not arrive. Form. The pages peeled away from the walls and ceiling, curling like leaves in fireless heat, until they shaped themselves into bodies, not people. Not yet, just outlines. Paper, thin constructs with human silhouettes, stitched together from all the softened edits and discarded compromises that had ever been made. Their heads were blank typewriter keys. Their mouths were erasers, and their eyes, God, their eyes were just spinning cursors, blinking endlessly, waiting for permission to be filled. They're the editors, Lena said, her voice low. No, Marcus said, stepping forward. They're the ones who benefit from the edits. The constructs didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their very presence was an act of correction. One stepped forward and raised its hand. Its fingers unraveled into red ink, scrawling a sentence into the air. Marcus never escaped. And suddenly his knees buckled. His breath caught in his throat. The book in front of him flickered. His memories of the hole, the typewriter, the bookstore, they shivered like bad reception. "Don't read it," Lena snapped, grabbing his arm. But it was too late. He'd seen it. And that was enough, because seeing was the first step to believing. One by one, the constructs began to advance, each one dragging behind them pages, manuscripts of his rewritten life, their lines stamped with marketable mediocrity. In one, he was a teacher who'd lost his wife and found hope again in small town charm. In another, he was a damaged man learning to live again with help from a quirky neighbor. In all of them, he learned something simple, something easy to swallow, something forgettable. Lena stepped between him and the editors. "No," she whispered, eyes burning. And then louder, "No." The floating book slammed shut. The pages around them froze, a beat of absolute stillness. Then the forgotten began to move. Not the constructs. Not the editors. The characters. Those who had been cut. Children with broken stories. Mothers with grief too raw to sell. Monsters too real to be metaphors. Villains too sympathetic to be left in. They stepped from the shadows, out of the walls, peeling themselves from the abandoned drafts. And they were not quiet. They did not shiver. They roared. The constructs hesitated. Because even they had not been designed to confront the original material. Marcus found his breath again. The weight in his chest began to lift. He grabbed Lena's hand, pulled her back toward the center, where the book hovered once more. He flipped it open. The pages were blank again. Waiting, but not like before. Now they waited with faith, not demand. He began to write. No keys, no pen, just voice, truth spoken aloud. There was a town, he said, as the constructs stepped back, a town built from memory, from wounds, from people who weren't ready to be forgotten. A place called Ashthorn. The characters moved with him. Every sentence pulled them forward. He wasn't writing them. He was writing for them. They tried to smooth it over, clean it, cut away the jagged edges. But the edges were the only honest part. The constructs began to dissolve. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They simply unraveled into ink and dust, their lines collapsing without conflict. Because once truth takes shape, correction becomes irrelevant. Marcus turned to Lena. "It's not enough to write it once," he said. "We have to make it unerasable." She nodded. "We have to anchor it." That's when the cathedral began to split, not collapse. Split. From the center, a shaft of light opened, not golden, not divine, just clear, like raw memory, unfiltered. And beyond it, stairs, leading up, not down. Up into the world, not the curated one, not the rewritten lie, the real one. "The cut stories want to come back," Lena whispered. "They're ready." Marcus looked around at the gathering crowd. Each face was familiar in a way that made his throat ache. Not because he'd known them, but because he'd felt their absence for years. And then he made a decision. He didn't want to escape alone. He wasn't the main character anymore. He wasn't even the hero. He was just the first to remember. He handed the book to one of the forgotten and turned toward the stairs. The stairs were not made of stone or wood or any material that obeyed rules. They were formed of lines, sentences, some fragmented, some full, some still bleeding from the edits that erased them. Every step Marcus and Lena took was on the back of a story someone once deemed too much, too slow, too ugly, too real. And yet, each footfall was solid, because memory, once reclaimed, does not crumble. Behind them, the forgotten followed, not shambling, not moaning, but walking, upright, awake. Each one whispering pieces of themselves as they climbed, not to anyone else, but to themselves. Names they'd been denied, details that had once been trimmed for pacing, the fathers that were never written, the children that were too complicated to keep, The endings that were once labeled unsatisfying, but now burned with honesty. It was not a quiet procession. It was a resurrection. And Marcus led it with Lena by his side, her hand wrapped in his, her eyes fixed upward. The light at the top wasn't warm. It wasn't even particularly bright. It was pale, uncertain. Like a sunrise forced to happen before the earth was ready. But it was open. And that was enough. He reached the final step, and stepped through. The world above did not welcome them. Not at first. Marcus emerged in the square of Ashthorn. The real Ashthorn. The one scrubbed clean and packaged neatly after the story had been buried. The trees were trimmed. The storefronts repainted. The same dog barked lazily across the street while someone watered roses too perfectly arranged to be wild. The sky was flat. The town too quiet. And the people. They didn't look up, didn't pause, didn't see him, until the next one stepped through. A child, eyes wide, dress torn. Blood dried into a memory on her sleeve. She stepped beside Marcus, and a woman across the street dropped her watering can. It shattered against the pavement. Her hands went to her mouth, and she whispered a name Marcus didn't recognize. But one the child clearly did. Then another stepped through, and another. Dozens, hundreds. A slow flood of the erased returning, not as vengeful spirits, but as truths with legs. And then came Lena. The world rippled. A tremor that passed not through the ground, but through perception itself. People stumbled, blinked. Some fell to their knees. Because she had been real once. She had existed, and the world had not forgotten her, it had only been told to. Now, it remembered, and remembrance hurt. From the horizon, a sound began to build, a rising tone, mechanical, rhythmic, typing. It came from the sky. The clouds. The places between moments. They were trying to rewrite it again, force the story to conform, clean it up, paint over the cracks. Marcus turned to Lena. "They're going to push back," he said. Lena nodded. "Then we push harder." He raised his voice. Not a shout, not a scream, a line. A first line. There was a town that tried to forget the truth, and a man who refused to let it. The typing stuttered, glitched, stopped. People around them began to weep. Not because they understood the whole story, but because somewhere, deep down, something they had buried was being unearthed. The story wasn't returning as fiction. It was returning as consequence. More forgotten characters flooded the square. A boy who had never spoken. A woman who was only ever a victim. A man who died too early in every draft. They found their places, their echoes, and the world began to reshape. Ashthorn's buildings aged in reverse, peeling back the fresh paint to reveal the cracks. The church steeple leaned again. The fountain cried water for the first time in years, because memory was stronger than editing, but not everywhere. Across the street, the bookstore remained clean, untouched, uninvited. Marcus walked toward it. The door opened before he could reach for the handle. Inside, the woman from the typewriter sat at a long table, flipping through versions. Her face wasn't as smooth now. It flickered, glitched. Pages peeled from her cheeks like masks. "You don't know what you've done," she said. "I do," Marcus replied. "I took your eraser. You think this world wants them back. You think truth is better than design." He stepped closer. "No, I don't think. I know." She stood. But behind her, the walls began to warp, pages melting, shelves cracking. The rewritten scripts she'd hoarded burned from the inside out. "The people out there," she hissed, "they'll beg for the version that makes sense." "Let them beg," Lena said from the doorway. "We'll still give them the version that hurts." And with that, Marcus dropped the book onto the counter. The original. Untouched, unfiltered. The one where he lost and bled and remembered anyway. The one where Lena lived, not because it made sense, but because it mattered. The bookstore screamed, not in sound, but in collapse. Its structure folded inward, trying to escape the truth pulsing from the book like a heartbeat. And then? Silence. Marcus stood outside once more, Lena beside him, and the forgotten now part of the town that had once betrayed them. Not heroes, not villains. Just restored. Ashthorn was ugly again, messy, honest, and alive. The sky looked different now. Not brighter, not darker, just real. Clouds didn't move in time with orchestral swells anymore. The light didn't always hit the good guys just right. There were shadows in places that used to stay well, lit for convenience. Marcus stood in the center of the square and watched as Ashthorn settled into itself like a dislocated shoulder snapping back into the socket. Functional. Whole, but still tender. People stared at him when he walked past. Not because they were afraid, not because they revered him, but because they remembered. And remembering him meant they had to remember everything that came with him, the disappearances, the lies, the pages torn out and rewritten by someone who had never lived here but believed they knew better. He had not been a hero. He had just survived the edits. And now everyone else was beginning to realize how much they had lost by going along with the new version. Children found drawings they didn't remember making. Teachers wept when a student they thought had transferred away hugged them like they'd never left. Couples woke up beside strangers and remembered other people's names. And somewhere beneath it all, Ashthorn shifted, like it was bracing itself for the weight of having its original story back. Marcus didn't sleep the first few nights. Neither did Lena. They stayed in the old church, which now leaned exactly the way he remembered. Slightly forward, as if it had secrets it was finally willing to share. They're going to want to forget again, Lena said quietly on the third night, staring out the stained glass window. I know. They'll find a new story to hide inside. I know. Are you going to stop them? Marcus didn't answer, because it wasn't his place anymore. He'd told the truth. He had brought back the lost pages. But now the town had to decide what to do with them. Lena turned toward him. Her face hadn't changed. Still tired, still fierce. But now it was full of questions she wasn't ready to ask aloud. You could leave, she said. You could go somewhere that doesn't remember. Somewhere clean. I don't want clean, Marcus said. You don't want rest either. I don't deserve it yet. She stepped closer. You didn't do this alone. I know, he said, finally meeting her gaze. But I was the first to stop pretending. Silence stretched between them, soft and steady. Outside, someone was painting over one of the tourist signs. The one that said Ashthorn was a quiet town full of charm. The new message hadn't been decided yet. For now, it just read Ast Htorne, as if the name alone was enough, as if it finally had the weight it needed. On the morning of the 7th day, a letter arrived at the church door. No return address, no stamp, just his name. Inside, a single line. Not everyone is happy with the ending you chose. He read it 3 times before folding it back up. Trouble, Lena asked. Maybe. But there was no fear in his voice, just a strange, sharp calm, because he knew what the message meant. There were still people out there, readers, watchers, editors, who had loved the softer version, who missed the safe story, who wanted the lie back, and now they knew who had ruined it. But Marcus didn't care, not anymore. The town was real again, not good, not healed, but real. And in the alley where Vitara had once whispered poison into the wind, wildflowers now bloomed through cracks in the concrete then, not because someone planted them, but because something remembered they were meant to grow there. Ashthorn didn't thank him. It didn't owe him that. It simply existed now with its story intact. And that was enough. That was always enough. It came back with him. He didn't realize it at first. Not in the quiet days after the rewritten world crumbled, and the original Ashthorn returned, raw and trembling in its own skin. Not when the townspeople began to remember, nor when Lena's hand found his again under the crooked window of the church. It didn't come in a scream, or a shadow, or even a nightmare. It came gently, like fog curling beneath a locked door. It waited. And then it watched. It wasn't the editors. They were gone. Dissolved in their own refusal to face consequence. And it wasn't the constructs, those fragile, blank-souled vessels that had once patrolled the boundary between fiction and reality. No. What followed Marcus out of the breach, what waited inside the folds of the restored story, was something older, something patient, something that understood one thing better than any monster ever could: how to wait for silence. It had no name, only a shape, sometimes a figure in the corner of his eye, sometimes the faint hum of typewriter keys behind a wall that didn't exist. It made no move, it made no threat, but it grew louder each day Marcus stayed. Ashthorne was real now, honest, and it had begun to settle. People were adjusting to the weight of their memories. The forgotten had carved out spaces for themselves again. Some left. Others stayed. Lena had begun rebuilding the old records room, sorting through what was left, salvaging stories, trying at last to document things without fear of how they would be received. But Marcus felt it in his bones. The shape, the thing that followed, the price. Because you don't resurrect a buried story without disturbing everything else down there. On the 10th night, he couldn't sleep. The typewriter keys he hadn't touched in days began to click by themselves. Just once. Then again. Then again. Until finally, he stood and crossed the room. A single page waited in the carriage. Typed cleanly. One sentence: the truth has been told. Now decide if you'll keep it. He stared at it. No signature. No flourish. Just a final ultimatum. He walked out into the cold air and found the town shivering in a familiar kind of quiet. Not fear, not tension, readiness. As if every house, every street lamp, every crack in the sidewalk knew that a decision was being made that would ripple far beyond this moment. Lena found him by the church steps. She said nothing, because she knew. The decision was never whether to tell the truth. He'd already done that. The decision now was whether to live in it. Whether to stay in the version that cut deeper but healed slower, or return to a simpler tale where the horrors were just set dressing and nothing ever left a scar. I can't stay, he said quietly. Not because I don't love this place, but because it'll always need someone new to carry the truth next. She nodded once. No tears. You already gave them back their story, she said. That's more than most ever get. He kissed her forehead, let his hand linger in hers a moment longer, then turned toward the woods. He didn't need a map. The breach had healed. The cathedral was closed, but there was still a path, not to escape, but to walk the story forward. He passed the bookstore. Now dark, silent, its shelves left to rot. Past the square where children played again. Not because their lives were easy, but because their lives were real. And when he reached the edge of town, the fog was waiting. It didn't speak, didn't move, just opened, welcomed. Because the truth doesn't vanish once spoken. It spreads. It waits for new ground, new lies, new towns trying to keep their sins under glass. He stepped into the fog. And behind him, Ashthorne didn't forget. Not this time.